Instead, it was left to the other sprinters to show their talents. But the Australian, Robbie McEwen, was perhaps a little too enthusiastic. And after crossing the line first, victory was given to the protesting Fabio Baldato. The Giro continues with Alessandro Petacchi in the pink jersey, and the terrain also begins to change. That's up next on OLN. Well, as we look down today on the start of the third stage of the Giro d'Italia, Robbie McEwen still smarting over being declassed from his victory yesterday. He's going to have to do it all again and try and get that elusive stage win. And one must say, too, so should Mario Cipollini think the same way. Hi, everybody. I'm Phil Liggett, joined by Paul Sherwen and Bob Roll. Welcome, boys. Well, we've seen 2 days of racing so far, and sadly, we've seen our first retirement because this morning, not amongst the starters, Mariano Piccoli. Well, the crash he went into that field looked innocent enough, but the Giro has thrown out the man who's had a good love affair with this event because he's twice won the King of the Mountains and he's also won the points competition. He did get up, he finished the stage, so be it, almost half an hour down, but sadly, he's now apparently broken 2 ribs and is a little bit stunned. He's not on the start today. Well, Paul, yesterday we got our first taste of the mountains, a third category climb. It did a lot more damage than we expected. It did a lot more damage than I think everybody expected, especially Mario Cipollini. There were, I think, some sketchy tactics, though, from Marco Pantani. And really, I cannot understand why he and the whole of his Mercatoni Uno team went to the front and laid down the law. We're looking back at that climb here, and you can see as soon as they hit the first couple of kilometres, which were the most difficult of the whole climb, riders were all over the place, just gasping for breath for the first time in this year's Giro d'Italia. Marco Pantani brought the whole of his team to the front. He may well have been a former winner of this bike race, Phil, but I can think the only reason that he wanted to ride as hard as that on the front was because he wanted to make sure that Mario Cipollini didn't get himself back into the main field. That is a big surprise to me, and I think it just goes to accentuate the rivalry of the Italian bike riders. Yeah. Well, Simone is the man we're all talking about, Bob, because he's the big race favourite. He hasn't lost any time yet, but he hasn't done anything special, but then he hasn't had the terrain, I suppose. And neither is Mario Cipollini. He should have won these 2 stages. Yes, these were set up just for Mario Cipollini so he could get closer or perhaps surpass the record of Alfredo Binda. The Giro organizers put this race course together so that it would prevent us from seeing a clear picture of the GC battle. No prologue, no mountains in the first whole week until they get to stage 7 of Terminillo. Mario Cipollini should have had plenty of chances to win stages, and he would be celebrating a huge record up until now, but that hasn't happened so far. He hasn't won any stages, and we still don't have a clear picture of what's going to happen in the GC battle. There was a little gap after the stage 1 sprint. 7 seconds were trailed off to Garzelli and Casagrande, where Simone and Gonzalez were able to stay in the front of the bike race, and that's the only indication that we've had so far that those 2 riders are maybe a little bit more ready for this Giro d'Italia. But time-wise, everyone is still together, and it's a wide-open bike race. All right. Well, we'll be very shortly going to the live action, but first of all, what about that sprint finish yesterday? We thought that Robbie McEwen had finally done it. It looked to me as though his legs locked up a little bit towards the line here. He says he never knew that Fabio Baldato was on his right shoulder. Well, I find that very hard to believe, and so does Baldato, and so did the judges, because they declassed him and put him to the back of the 70-man bunch sprint. Here's the overall situation. Petacchi still the leader. Baldato has closed in to 4 seconds. Colombo's up to 3rd. Graziano completes there the top 5. As we look at the top 10, though, watch out. Aitor Gonzalez, the Spanish winner of the Tour of Spain last year, now rides for Fassa Bortolo. He's 24 seconds in 10th. Of the notables, Simone is riding extremely well. The others, by the way, lost a few seconds when they were split up on that first stage. The judges have not give them those 7 seconds back. What they did do, because they protested about Popovic being put in the lead group, they moved Popovic back to that group, and so they're all at 7 seconds now. So that was interesting, Paul. Now, today's route, our first taste of the second category climbs.
Yes, it's again going to be a very difficult ride, I think, for all of these bike riders, because once again, people were expecting Mario Cipollini to get out and equal the record of Alfredo Binda. Well, I don't think he's going to do that today, because as you can see, we leave from Policoro for a 145-kilometre route to Terme Luigiane, and there's a big stuff climb halfway through the race.
Thanks very much, Paul. Well, it's all action today. Day 3 it is, and we are racing today. The riders have had a breakaway. They've regrouped. There is a lot of pressure on at the front, and it seems, Paul, it is the Seiko team who are doing the driving.
Well, they've got a chance today to try and blow the race apart, because I think this climb we'll go over in a couple of kilometres' time is going to be a very difficult one. At the moment, the Italian television back at the team manager's cars trying to find out what the tactics of today's race are, but over the last few kilometres the speed has certainly increased. We started off with about 29 kilometres covered in the first hour, then there was a breakaway, a very interesting breakaway of 8 riders. Within that breakaway, Svarada, Jimmy Casper, Di Biase, men who are real sprinters trying to get an advantage before the climb. But right now, everybody's thrown caution to the wind, and the pace is really hot.
Well, that's Alaio Adriano there, just anxious. He's still on more or less local roads, so he's moving away from his home now with every turn of the pedal revs. We head down towards Sicily. The field, though, in angry mood today, and just look at the speed being piled on here by the Seiko men. We're looking here at Dario Pieri as the field continue under pressure. It's 30 degrees Celsius today. That's very hot indeed. So the Giro underway. Sit back now and enjoy the live action with us as we just take our first break. 66 kilometres from the finish. Let's remind ourselves the number of starters today. There were in fact 168 riders on the start line. There was 169 that started this race, but we've now lost poor old Mariano Piccoli, out with broken ribs after that crash into a field yesterday. But for the Americans, there's good news from around the world, because the new world ranking points have been issued today, and I think it's the first time ever there are 2 Americans in the top 10. Lance Armstrong always in there. He's number 2 behind Zabel, who retained his lead going in for a second year, while down there in number 6 now and up from 10th is Tyler Hamilton. Hamilton, by the way, having a marvellous season and was second in the Giro d'Italia last year, not riding this time around. We expect a great Tour de France from him though. And Tyler started the year 38th, so that's a remarkable achievement for him, now up to 6th overall. And look also there, other riders in the Giro. Cipollini number 8, the world champion. Aitor Gonzalez 9th, and he's lying 10th, by the way, in the Giro at the moment. Best of the favourites, I would think. Well, on the right there, yesterday's winner rather, when he came in behind Robbie McEwen, that was Fabio Baldato. He's stopping for a natural break. Maybe, Paul, he's sensing that the pace is beginning to get a little bit of sanity amongst it again.
Well, I think it's just a brief respite for the moment. You can see these riders just spreading across the road, but earlier on it was very fast indeed. And I think these guys just slowing down temporarily, Phil, before we come to the big climb, because that's, I would say, Bob, when the fireworks are going to start.
Well, Gilberto Simoni has put a lot of his riders at the front of the bike race. They've been racing very quickly, a very aggressive stage so far on the impetus of the Seiko team. So I think that Gilberto Simoni wants to do a little bit of racing, and perhaps the climb to come will trail off a lot of our current leaders. Pataki and Cipollini was dropped yesterday. This climb, if it's stiffer than yesterday's climb, we could see a whole nother composition of the GC at the end of the day on a stage that we didn't really anticipate to be that difficult, because it is a long ways to the finish from the climb, but a very hot day, almost no wind, and very aggressive racing so far.
Well, there's the whole peloton. They're all together, nobody off the back, but they have been under pressure. They in fact made a 17-minute late start today. For some reason they were a bit late getting away from the start in Policoro, and they seem to be pulling it back nonetheless for a scheduled arrival, because they really have got to move on today. As Bob has said, it is very hot. It's 30 degrees Celsius, which is about 87 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's very humid down here in the south of Italy. And some of the riders are beginning to complain about the compulsion of wearing helmets, because they're feeling very uncomfortable, they say, in these conditions. Well, they're saying it's 70 kilometres to go, not quite as far out as we thought. We thought about 65 out, actually. which means that they'll come to the climb at around about 100 kilometres covered, so about 30 kilometres to the climb. This climb, Paul, second category, it's over 7 miles.
It's a difficult climb, and in fact the difficult thing about the climb is although they go through the King of the Mountains after 11 kilometres or 7 miles of climbing, the road actually continues to undulate for another 15 or 20 kilometres. That makes it very difficult for men dropped on the steep slopes of the climb to actually reintegrate the main peloton. And then there is a very dramatic descent down. This is what the King of the Mountains competition looks like after stage 2. Well, Freddy Gonzalez, a clear leader there, ahead of Francesco Casagrande and Stefano Garzelli up in third place. Today's climb, though, is a slightly more serious affair. That was a third category climb yesterday. Today is a second category climb with a lot more points at stake. But interestingly enough, Stefano Garzelli has been complaining in the press about an injury to his shoulder. Well, he was up there in the King of the Mountains competition. He was 7th on the stage. I hope for Gilberto Simoni that he doesn't heal too quickly, because otherwise he'll be unstoppable.
I have to say, Bob, I'm sure they put these rumours out occasionally. You used to tell people how bad you felt at the start, didn't you?
I did that on a regular basis, but I was not lying. I was actually telling the truth, because there was no reason for me to try to play cat and mouse with the press. And I did tell a few tall tales, but not based on my form. I knew what my form was like every day, and it was bad.
I'll tell you what, though, it's rather sad about Piccoli going out, because he was a real power man for the Lampre team, especially as Casagrande. He looks to me to be really shaping up for a good ride here.
Casagrande looks good, and they would have been using Piccoli a lot if he had gotten the race lead jersey. So that is a blow to the Lampre team that Mariano Piccoli is no longer in the bike race.
And also, we saw the face of Casagrande at the start. He looked pretty grim when he signed in. He was not happy with what he heard when Piccoli wasn't coming out.
Well, he wouldn't be happy about that at all, because he's a great asset to the team. But also, Lampre admitted over the last couple of days that they still want to get themselves a selection for the Tour de France. Obviously, a bit of a cloud over Raimundus Rumsas after last year's performance, where his wife was found to have doping products in the car. But the team themselves still want to get selection, and there's going to be a lot of teams looking for selection on May the 19th.
They're queuing up quite literally, and once again, I'm glad I'm not the race director of the Tour de France, Jean-Marie Leblanc. He has once more a very difficult decision to make as to those final selections. There we are, a little bit of history for you on Alessandro Petacchi, and as we look at that, we'll just pop off a few more messages and see you in a moment. Here back, and he looks all set for his assault of the Fagnano Castello, which is the only climb of the day. From now on, the road gently rises. We're sort of leaving sea level and climbing to a height of about 2,400 feet.
It's a difficult climb, and although the average gradient is only about 4%, it does kick up in 1 or 2 places. The difficulty will be the length of the climb, Phil. It's around about 11 kilometres, and then over the top it does continue to undulate for an awful long time. I do have to say, this team we're looking at here, the Columbia Cell Italia team, is one of the smaller teams, but it's a team which I think is going to be very evident this year in the mountains, Bob, because if you look down the list of riders that they've got, we're looking here at Freddy Gonzalez pedigree, Castelblanco, Freddy Gonzalez, Robert Marin, Herman, Dario Munoz. They are all very good men when it comes to the uphill stages of the Giro, and I think they'll be rather a surprise this year, because they've got better every season.
Yes, absolutely. They love the Giro d'Italia because it's a long stage race, tons of mountains in the race this year, and the Cella Italia Columbia team seem to attack and come into good form for this one race. They can't qualify for the Tour de France just yet because they don't have enough points, and they're not in the selection process with the Société Tour. But I think it's a solid team. They love the mountains, and I'm sure they're going to fight for this green mountain climbers jersey until the bitter end of the bike race. And if they could win that, it would be a great accomplishment for that small and young team.
It certainly would, and a lot of interesting news. It's always here, isn't it, Phil, at the big races that you get the rumours, and the big rumour again is that Team Coast have been disqualified from the sport for a second time, and there's a big scramble going on right now because Bianchi are actually announcing they would like to take over the title sponsorship of the team. But to do that, they have to fold the team and reform it within 9 days, so they've got a chance of getting selection as a wild card for the Tour de France, because Team Coast, if it disintegrates, will lose its slot as a selection, so that would put 5 teams up for a wild card position. It's a lot of paperwork's got to change places to try and get Jan Ullrich one way or another into the Tour.
Sounds just the sort of material that we can expand even further on the web. And don't forget, we have a live web chat with you all. It comes to you on Wednesday, May the 14th between 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And Paul, Myself, Phil Liggett and Bob Roll will all be in the hot seat waiting for your questions. So come and join us in the chat room at www.oln.com. We're looking down the peloton here now as they race relentlessly towards the big climb of the day. That's not the sort of road one goes out on the attack on, that's for sure. A long straight road like that. Well, if you're wondering who won the Intergiro at Villa Piana Lido, so are we, because it all happened before we came on air, and the race organisation have yet to transmit the results. So we can't give you any update on that yet, but we will when it comes to us, of course. Now, what are we looking at here through the magnifying glass? It looks as though he's thrown off half his bicycle there. I don't no idea what that is, but it's come back on the road anyway. So I think it was a bag flying through the crosswind there, and it's returned onto the course. Well, the situation down there, by the way, in the Intergiro competition, there are two leaders there now. Nasdutz, who won the first one, followed by Mario Cipollini, who won the second one. They're equal first, but Cipollini is wearing the sky blue jersey as race leader of the competition. And yes, he is wearing the jersey, Paul, and I understand that Martin Brunn, who we both know pretty well, told him this morning if he didn't wear the jersey, he would send him home.
Well, he said he would do. In fact, Cipollini is at the back of the race here right now, getting some adjustment, I think, to his race radio, because Cipollini, I think, will be later on looking to try and get himself over this climb. The interesting thing is he was actually fined yesterday. It's not, it is Cipollini. He's got the light blue jersey, the Azzurra jersey on here. He was fined for not going to the presentation yesterday. And yes, Martin Brunn did say that if he didn't wear the jersey today, he would send him home. He let him off yesterday because he admitted that Mario Cipollini was second in the points competition and not necessarily the leader. But Martin Brunn would have to be, I would say, Bob, a very brave commissaire to kick Mario Cipollini out of the Giro d'Italia.
I'll tell you what, I know Martin, and he would do it. And he would also have gone personally to Cipollini at the start and told him exactly how he felt, because Martin is a very good commissaire, and he doesn't drink any alcohol, by the way. He's the manager of a casino near Amsterdam, and he's the sort of man you can't really bend. He's just a very straight, upright individual. So he would stick by the rules, I'm sure of that. He'll probably be fining Cipollini anyway, because look at his jersey. He's cut the sleeves off. So he'll get a
rolled up, which wouldn't be a fine, but if he has cut them off, he will get a fine for that. Mario Cipollini never won to stay out of the papers. If he can't win, at least he does something controversial to keep him in the front, in the press and in the public eye.
But like everybody else, Bob, we love him, don't we? And we're going to miss the day he retires from the bike game. We're looking now at the peloton. There he is. Our director is Italian, by the way. He must be hearing our commentary, though, because he keeps giving us these wonderful shots of Mario Cipollini at the minute. And for all we know, he may well have won the sprint at 51 kilometres today, because no one around the world has yet got the results of that Intergiro sprint. Very early before television pictures came live to us. This is the peloton at play or at rest, whichever you wish to think at the moment, because they're lining themselves up for what's turning up to be a big climb. Marco Pantani here. He might welcome this climb. He showed us his legs yesterday. I wonder. We'll know all the answers very soon. We're now taking a break. And we're back on the roads of the Giro d'Italia, stage 3 today, 145 kilometres. That's about 90 miles, and that's where we're going, to Terme Luigiani. Have you ever been there, Bob?
Yes, we spent a night there one time, and our teammate Jeff Bradley decided to take a bath in the evening. Forgot all about it, went for a walk. He flooded his room. The bathwater overflowed.
I'm beginning to regret asking this question, but we'll carry on. Yeah.
We thought it was so hilarious that the ceiling had collapsed underneath his room floor until we realized it fell right into the kitchen, and we didn't get to eat dinner that night.
Right. Does he only get one bath every year then?
That was the last bath we ever let Jeff Bradley take.
Well, there's Mario Cipollini. He failed a little bit yesterday, didn't he, as he came onto the climb? Well, as we've just been chatting with Bob there, now what is it about little Marco Pantani? He really rode with a vengeance yesterday. Well, here's Bob now with his view of the great climber.
If Marco Pantani can't be famous, he has no qualms whatsoever with being infamous. No longer able to win races on his own, he decided to prevent Mario Cipollini from winning. Of course, he himself did none of the actual effort required to prevent Cipo from catching up after he was dropped on the third category climb about 25 k's from the finish. Elefantino then put his teammates on the front for one reason only. Pantani is jealous of Cipollini's success and prefers not to see him win if his, or more accurately his teammates' efforts can prevent Cipo from winning. He gained no glory for the GC or stage battles, And in the long run, these petty considerations will do nothing except exhaust his teammates. This idiotic maneuver by Pantani might be just what Super Mario needs to ignite his fire for victory.
Yes, thanks very much, Bob. Well, this picture here of an ostrich farm is making Paul Sherwen feel very much at home, because Paul lives in South Africa, or in Southern Africa, and that's the peloton just racing on now down to the bottom end of Southern Europe and heading towards the finish today in Terme Luigiani. And they've really calmed it down after a very rapid intersection.
Well, I think one or two of these guys are actually acting like ostriches right now. They're trying to put their head into the sands because they don't want to see the mountain that's rearing up in front of them. They're about 15-20 kilometers away from the start of the climb, and I think this is really just the lull before the storm. A few moments ago, we were cruising along at speeds approaching 45 kilometers an hour, 27, 28 miles an hour. And one or two riders, Bob, I think today feel they've got a chance of changing the order of merit at the top of the leaderboard, because most people think that Pataki won't get over this climb today.
Well, Alessandro Pataki had a very hard time maintaining his pink jersey over the climbs in the finale of yesterday's stage. The tempo was so hard over those climbs. Pataki arrived at the finish line absolutely exhausted and can only get fourth in the sprint, where he should have been able to win easily, apart from Robbie McEwen, of course, who was very fast as well. But Pataki got beaten to the line by Giuliano Figueras, who looks very close to being able to get the jersey himself. That would be a great result for the Panadia team to spend a few days in the pink jersey as race leader. Giuliano Figueras is now right up there in fourth place, just 23 seconds behind Pataki. And if he gets dropped, well, then we might see a new race leader at the end of the day.
That's Ronaldo Noscentini down there, who's had a problem with his tyre. He's not exactly in a rush, is he? But the cars are rapidly passing him by, and he seems to have done it just as his team car arrived. He didn't need it, but the push might be useful.
Well, we saw a bag get kicked up by the peloton and fly back into the group, and it might have landed in Noscentini's rear cluster, making it impossible to shift the bike, so he had to stop there and pull it out. Luckily for him, there's a lull in the tempo at the front of the group, so he had no trouble of getting back into the front of the bike race, and he's actually on very good form. He won the Giro di Toscana just a few days before the Giro started, giving his small team, Fiave Pinzolo, the Formaggi formation from central Italy, a chance to race in the Giro d'Italia. They've been very aggressive, especially because Elio Aggiano is from the southern part of Italy and has been at the front of the bike race consistently the first 3 days. He's attacked a lot, and hopefully his teammate Noscentini can get back in the bike race in the next few kilometers. Before the climbing starts, we'll see what happens.
Well, Noscentini's a very, very strong bike rider. He's never done a lot since he finished second in the World Under-23 Championship, Paul, back in 1998. Only won about 3 races.
Well, he's a rider that was always promised to do something very good, and we actually saw him ride exceptionally well a couple of years ago in the Tour de Langkawi. We were mentioning earlier about whether or not Bob had been to Terme Luigiani before. Well, this is going to be the 4th time that the Giro d'Italia has been here, and it's always been an attacking winner who's got the victory here. As we look at the problem here of Strauss, you see, as Bob was saying, a lot of pieces of paper and plastic bags get kicked up in a bike race like this. But coming back to the story about the Giro, in '93 it was Konishev who got the win here. In 95, Fondriest, and in 99, Laurent Jalabert. So it just indicates that it's the kind of course, Phil, that I think we will see a small breakaway developing towards the end, because it's a very tough run-in today.
Well, we just saw there one of the riders taking on a food bag. There's no official feed station today. It looks like they've put one in, though, under these hot conditions. A helicopter directly above the riders, as we're now continuing to about 62 kilometres from the finish at the moment. So, as we set ourselves up to go to break, here's a little teaser for you now. Pens and papers ready, and this is our Expedia.com trivia question. Who holds the record for the fastest road stage of the Giro d'Italia? Remember, I'm saying road stage. There's your choices. I'll tell you when we come back after this.
You're drawn to
road stage. Well, if you've won 40 stages, who else would it be? Mario Cipollini managed to get one of them quicker than anybody else in 1997, almost 31 miles an hour, and that's by Expedia.com trivia. Let's get back to the action. Here we are. The boys at the back have just taken on their feed for the day. It's a bit of an unofficial feed, this, because a race under 150 kilometres normally does not have a feeding station, but with the conditions like they are, and they are sweltering out there, and then it looks as though the referees have made an exception today. There is a strong crosswind blowing. We're seeing continual pictures, Paul, of riders getting bits of plastic bags and stuff in their spokes and gears.
A lot of riders are very nervous too, because especially going through these feeding stations, riders want to take on enough food and drink to get themselves through the next 40 or 50 kilometres, and they don't, and then they just want to eject from their pockets whatever is in excess. And we've seen on a couple of occasions, haven't we, Bob, bottles being thrown off the road and bouncing their way back on, and that's always a very dangerous moment going through a feeding station like this.
If a water bottle bounces back into your front wheel, you could have a hard time staying on your bicycle, and I've seen a number of times where riders have crashed because of just that. So the racers have to be careful to eject their bottles fully off the road. And when you see the scramble for the water bottle, when it finally does get out of the way of the bike racers, it's actually sometimes quite an impressive sight. There's Dario Pieri, the big man of the classics, riding the Giro d'Italia in support of Gilberto Simoni. He was in on some of the early attacks today, and it's great to watch the Saeco team attack. And maybe Simoni is planning something special once the road points up this climb right here, and here's the peloton getting right onto the first parts of the slope. We'll see what happens. They're still en masse. They've been racing very hard up until now. We'll see if it's an aggressive climb or if they sit back and regroup a little bit and give the sprinters a chance to get over the top. So far, nobody's attacked on these early slopes of the first climb of the day.
Yes, the roads are all uphill now, Paul. It's quite a rough ride now. The riders, I think the way the riders are riding, they're showing a lot of respect to this first big climb of the race.
Well, they're looking over their shoulders, trying to see who's going to be the first to attack. It's Fassa Bortolo moving to the front end of the main field right now. I would expect the first attack to probably come from Selle Italia or from Kelme, because those are the guys who've got the big advantage of being some of the best climbers. It's always difficult, though, after a fairly sedate half an hour or so, to accelerate on the slopes of a climb, and one or two riders will be worried about that, especially Mario Cipollini, who now admits he will probably have to wait a couple of days before he gets his first stage win. And he's actually saying that he thinks he could win on the stage into Catania, which surprises me because there's a huge first category climb. Cipollini reckons it's so far from the finish that he's got no problem in coming back at all.
Well, we really expected Mario Cipollini to be in the lead of the points competition. Here's the information for you. He's in second place nonetheless because he got one second place finish. Pataki there, though, has been a fourth and a win, and that's kept him the leader of the points. The first 15 riders every day, the winner gets 25 points. That's on every stage except the time trial days. So the scoring is regular. You also pick up points out on the Intergiro course as well. Figueras there up in sixth place, and we're expecting him to ride himself into this race in a big way. He could be the next pink jersey. Pataki was saying at the start, didn't really think he was going to keep his lead today.
Well, he's worried about this climb. I think all the non-climbers and the sprinters are worried about this climb. For the moment, they haven't really turned the screws up. They're about a kilometre or so away from the hardest part of the climb, and I think then we'll see some serious accelerations. But if the top men do disappear from the leaderboard, like Pataki and Baldato, and then the man who's got the biggest advantage is Colombo, because he's got about a 4-second advantage over Figueras, but then it's only 1 second, and there's so many riders, Bob, still in with a chance, because after all, the fact we discussed a little earlier about this race, there has been no prologue, there has been no time trial so far. All of the big favourites have been hiding themselves in the main field.
Yes, absolutely. So far, we haven't seen a GC battle yet, but maybe one shaping up today. That was Moreno Di Biase trying to stretch out the legs, maybe get over this climb with the leaders, have a chance in a sprint. He's a very fast sprinter, won a stage recently in the Tour of Georgia. Very quick rider, racing for the Pinzolo team, stretching the legs out. He was dropped with Cipollini yesterday, lost over 6 minutes before they did arrive at the finish line. But if they keep going at this pace, everyone will be able to get to the finish together, and it'll be another mass sprint.
Well, if it is a mass sprint, it's going to be rather difficult because, in fact, the last 1,800 metres of the stage is mainly uphill, and it kicks up to about 8%, Phil, for the last kilometre. So I think it's more than likely going to be a strongman's finish rather than a finish for somebody like Mario Cipollini. I would put it down as an Eric Zabel finish if he was riding, and his teammate Danilo Hondo is actually doing exceptionally well at the moment in the Peace Race, having taken the first 2 stage victories.
Yes, and his teammate Stefan Westerman, who once finished second in Paris-Roubaix last year it was, he won yesterday's stage. So the Telecom team are enjoying that. They don't seem to have missed Jan Ulrich, do they? They're still winning wherever they seem to ride. Ulrich, though, out looking for a team again, and I wonder if he'll get a ride in this year's Tour de France. Let's hope so. There's the pink jersey, the only leader of the Giro so far after 2 days. Pataki wiping away his horrible memories of second places to Mario Cipollini, starting off with a win on the first stage, and it was Cipollini getting second place. Now, from the race we are hearing that they are going to show us the results, and there they are. So DiBiase, Bob, we've just seen him, won the sprint. Naz Dutz will retake the lead tomorrow in the light blue jersey as the leader of the competition, and Jimmy Casper, the FrancaisDesJeux.com sprinter, got third.
Well, Jimmy Casper's a handy bike rider. He's another bike rider from France, Bob, hasn't he? Over the last few years has promised to burst into the big time, but he's never quite confirmed, and I think that's really why FDJeux.com have brought their team here to let the young riders learn about riding a 3-week stage race. Because I've always said, along with Massimo Testa, the doctor who used to be with you at the Motorola team, that a 3-week bike race like this completely changes your morphology.
You get a different physiology entirely after a 3-week bike race, and let's see if it suits Jimmy Casper. He's a very fast rider, but doesn't have the resistance of the other big fast men, so he consistently gets drops on the climb and can't finish, but maybe this will help him do just that, and we'll see him start to win a lot more races after he finishes a Grand Tour.
Well, I reckon we're about, it's hard to pin down, but we're about 45 kilometres from the finish at the moment, and the hill we go over the top after 109 kilometres of the race today. We won't miss any of the action. We'll just go away for a few more messages and then rejoin us as we get closer now to the first mountain of this year's Giro. See you in a moment. We still have to climb over a hill which is just over 11 kilometres long before we get up towards the finish itself at around about 400-500 feet above sea level.
It's a difficult race today. In fact, the difficulty is the fact that this climb is 11 kilometres long and it undulates afterwards. I always hated those climbs, Bob, when I was racing, because if there was a descent, you knew you had a slight chance of coming back into the bike race, didn't you? Because you could take some serious risks. But when it undulates, you know it's all over.
Yes, you have to pull the plug on it and let the water drain out of your chances for the day. But the rolling hills after a climb are always the most difficult because you're making a huge effort on the climb. You get a bit of a respite, the lactic acid creeps into your muscles, and then you have to start climbing again. Very difficult.
Robbie McEwen at the front there, obviously trying to slow down affairs, because Robbie would like to get over this climb today to get some revenge on yesterday's disqualification, or relegation to give it its correct term. But Robbie, admittedly, Phil, thought he was going in a straight line, but we definitely know that he did zigzag slightly towards the end of that last 50 metres.
Well, Robbie will get his revenge somewhere along the route, I'm sure of that, but I'm not sure it'll be today. The peloton, though, he's a good tactician, Robbie. If he can dictate the pace, it means it won't hurt him so much when he gets up to that hill. The road is actually going up slightly now, as you can see, as we get up around that little horseshoe bend. Well, you know, we're talking about Robbie McEwen, and sprinting really is never for the nervous, as we saw yesterday. Well, to show us how they do it, Paul Sherwen will tell us.
The life of a sprinter is a tough one. You have to take all kinds of risks to keep your place in the line, as we've seen since the start, when Graham Brown used his head and body to get the message across to his contemporaries as to the position he wanted to keep in the line. But when the finish is in sight, something takes over in the sprinter's mind, and despite knowing the rules, it's as if they want to cross the line in first place. They turn off their brain and animal instinct just takes over. Heading to the line yesterday, McEwen could have won the race, but he felt the comeback of Baldato. It's a second sensor that a sprinter develops. It worried him. He purposely moved across his challenger, closing the door, as we say in cycling jargon. But that's why we have judges. They didn't like it and they relegated him. But a sprinter lives on emotion and nerves, and that decision will spur Robbie McEwen to look for revenge.
And now we're back with the men live here, and this is the climb now. They started the gentle slopes. It's going to be a high tempo climb on good road surface, and we'll see if Freddie Gonzalez and the boys can rip off the front like they did yesterday. Julian Wynne, the British champion, just off it to the right in that white jersey, riding his first year professional, and finds himself right in the thick of it in the Giro d'Italia, and he's really proud to be here. I can tell you, he's enjoying himself. He comes from mid Wales, down in Abergavenny, a beautiful area full of mountains, and in fact the hill he's about to climb, Paul, is about as high as the mountains get down there.
It's about as high as the mountains get in the whole of Great Britain, actually. But Julian Wynne, I think, is a rider we'll see develop an awful lot through this 3-week bike race. He's riding for the Factor team, who've been fairly aggressive since the start. But Bob, looking at the guys here right now, everyone is starting to get nervous, aren't they? You can see heads looking round. Everyone's twitchy. They know that something is about to happen.
Yes, I'm very surprised that the tempo has been so slow in the early slopes of the climb. thus far yesterday, right from the beginning of the climb. It was attacks all the way over the top. They've allowed the pace to come down, I think, because it was such an aggressive bike race leading up to the foot of the climb. The tempo came off just then. The riders saying, hey, let's take it easy for a while, guys. Let's get to the finish in one piece. But they've been racing at a very, very mellow tempo so far up this climb, and everyone's still in the group.
They're still looking over the shoulder. You can see an increase in the number of the lime green jerseys on the frontier. Kelme actually starting this race with only 8 riders, and I think here's the first action, and it has come, I think. It looks as if that's Selle Italia charging off the front. It is. Well, that's not a surprise. We had expected that. In fact, this is one of the Italians on the Selle Italia squad, Bob. This is Raffaele Iliano, but not surprisingly, this team is the team that we expect to ride pretty well when we go into the mountains.
Raffaele Iliano, beg your pardon, who's just launched the attack, and so now the cards are on the table. Who's going to go in after him? This is not a steep climb, it is a long, fast climb, although looking down there, Bob, it looks a bit as though it is getting a bit steeper now.
It's getting to be a real climb now, and the attacks are coming furious, and Julian Wynn, just on cue there, he must have overheard your comments.
I think just
Perhaps
to prove we're not biased in any way, Bob, you must now commentate on these pictures by yourself for the next 50 minutes or so.
Julian Wynn from Great Britain there, 169, getting onto the wheel of the Italian on the Selle Italia. We're going to show a replay of the attack there. You can see it coming on the right-hand side of your screen. Right up the road, Iliano making an attack on the Selle Italia team. This is what they've come to the Giro to do, is to attack once the road points upwards. All of them, I think, are climbers. Julian Wynn not noted so much for his climbing skills, but it's not a steep climb, and he's been able to close the gap. But I think we'll see a lot more attacks coming from the peloton now that the can is open and the race is on, and we'll see if it can come back together again. But right now, everyone racing quite hard. Lamprey, Kelme, all the big teams, Gerolsteiner going up the road now, starting the attacks.
Well, this has really lit the blue touch paper. Everyone was waiting for the first attack to come on this climb, and let's not forget Julian Wynn wearing that special jersey as the national champion of Great Britain. He's a very serious bike rider, and I think we'll be happy to be in this break situation right now. 1 or 2 riders moving across. Kelme obviously looking for the breakaway today. That was Jordi Rieri, who went across first from Kelme, and it looked as if Kelme were trying to put a second rider into this move, Bob.
Another one of the Selle Italia Columbia riders, number 36 up there in the break now, and they're making progress, and that's a Gerolsteiner rider on the front of the bike race now.
Well, it's Dario Munoz who's got across there, Phil, from Selle Italia, so this is a serious move.
So it is building, but of course this is a long climb. As we look here at Jordi Riera, as the field now are going to have to work out what they're going to do. We won't miss very much. The climb, the steep part, is still ahead. We'll take a break. And welcome back. The breakaway has just eased itself off the front of the peloton as they begin the long climb here today of the Fagnano Castello. And leading the escape was Raffaele Iliano and Julian Wynn, the British rider, one of only 3 British riders taking part in the Giro. The peloton, I was about to say, seemed to have settled down, but now there's a counter-attack coming here from Formaggio Pizzoli. Well, for once it doesn't look like the style here of Aggiano. But he's pulling a little group away. Now we've got Julian Wynn, Iliano, Michele Gobi is up there, Ronnie Schultz of Gerolsteiner. The gap is 24 seconds. Jordi Riera of Kelme and Kinziato is also up there. That's the composition of the breakaway. They're on the right of the picture. Julian Wynn going through on the other side there of Jordi Riera. But there's nobody that will really draw the string of the race leaders.
It's a strange breakaway, and it got away rather easily. There was just one move came, and that was Riera, who rode across to it from Kelme. But right now there's a bit of disorganisation at the front end of this main field, Phil, because they're looking to try and encourage everybody to come through and do the pacemaking, and there's been a crash at the back.
This is just come to a grinding halt here. Now these are the pictures which we've just... I think somebody has stopped on the right of the road. I'm not sure anybody's actually fallen off there, but indeed the riders have had a tangle of machinery. I didn't catch the number of that rider, but it could well have been... yeah, I think it was one of the Selle Italia riders who stopped on the right of the road. Clearly a puncture. Whether they fell, is unclear at the moment.
I think it was Robert Marin who had a problem there. But this is always the case. The roads here are very narrow. Everybody wants to ride in the first 10 or 15 places. That's the safest place to be. And on a long stretch like this, people will take risks to try and move up to the front. And I think that's just exactly what happened there. Let's have a little look at exactly what did happen. It seemed to have happened at the rear end of the main field. And it's amazing how everybody locks up and somebody's gone onto the terrace there, Bob, probably looking for a cappuccino.
Off there to the side, trying to get around these riders. I think it was a mechanical, maybe a chain slipping and a change of gears. The whole road covered with bike riders. The riders in the back barely had a moment to stop. A couple of guys clipping out there. They'll all get back in, but they're attacking in the front of that group now. It's the last place you want to be, is chasing on right when the race is starting to break apart at the front.
Well, these are the leaders now as we return back up to the breakaway. There are 6 riders up here. This is the man who started it all, Iliano, the Italian on the Colombian team, Sella Italia. Julian Wynn, 3rd in line. Then comes Jordi of Kelme. The rider here is Quinziato of Lampre, who's just tagged on there to the back of them.
Well, these are good roads for racing on at the moment, aren't they, Bob? That gap, which was given at 24 seconds a few moments ago, has certainly dropped down quite dramatically. They don't want that breakaway to establish itself. They want to pull it all back before we get to the serious part of this climb. And I think 1 or 2 riders in this leading group right now are starting to turn into passengers. That's why they're getting pulled back by the main field.
Yes, a smart tactic is to look behind when you're in a breakaway situation like this. If you can't get the message from the team director of the time gap, you want to look back down the road and see if the chase is on, whether or not you want to put any more effort into it. Looks like Michele Gobe has seen that, and he is going not pull through. He's going to sit on the wheels, wait for the peloton to catch up and reorganize another attack. And you can see that the peloton is just coming into the picture behind the breakaway. And when they turn around, they can look and see. I bet it will be the Saeco team on the front of the group. It seemed to be the riders in red that were chasing a little bit. The peloton right behind the breakaway can keep them in them sights as long as they're 15 or 20 seconds ahead, and always be able to judge the distance they need and the effort they need to close the gap down.
The one man that nobody seems to realise is there, they're saying there's 5 in this escape. As you can see, there are 6, and the one man they've missed off is probably the best climber in the group, Hernan Munoz.
I don't think anybody saw him coming across, but he's definitely there right now. It was his teammate Iliana who set up the move. I think Iliana right now is regretting the fact that he did that, because he's just hanging on at the back there. There is Munoz, 2nd from the back, and the main field not too far behind right now. This looks like a counter-attack trying to come across, but for the moment, the whole of this race is not very much more than 15 seconds apart.
Oh no, I thought it was our man again, Adriano, but it's 87, so it's Mesa, the Colombian on the Formaggio Pinzolo Fiaba team, as he tries to get across. Now, he's a good climber if he can make it.
He's an excellent climber right now, but you can see there's an awful lot of disorganisation. That will probably be Iliano coming backwards here right now. He was hanging onto the back of that leading group of 6 riders, so 1 or 2 riders disappearing from the fray, and there's been a serious acceleration at the front, hasn't there, Bob, by this leading group right now, and 1 or 2 riders, I think, really suffering.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was the Colombian Munoz, who is a fantastic climber, putting the hammer down at the front of the bike race. He's shattered the breakaway at the moment, and everyone having trouble getting back into the front of the bike race. And it is Ronnie Schultz there from the Gerolsteiner team on the front, and Jordi Riera. He is a very good bike racer. He's having a good season, a great climber. Let's see if Munoz is still in this front leading group. Putting the tempo, though, is the Gerolsteiner rider at the moment.
Well, one man who disappeared pretty quickly there, Phil, was Julian Wynn. I think not very happy with those accelerations as we got to the more serious part of the climb. And salutations to the Giro from the side. A lot of spectators turned out over the last couple of days to see Mario Cipollini. And this is the wrong end of the peloton to be in right now, because the pressure is starting to get turned up at the front.
So we are winding our way up what is an 11.5 kilometre climb today of the Fagnano Castello. And Ronnie Schultz is leading the breakaway, constantly changing in its formation. Gone now is Iliano and Julian Wynn. Joining is Mesa. Climbers are beginning to sharpen their legs. We'll see all of the climb when we come back after these messages. The climb is now really beginning to hot up here, because back in the main field, Marco Pantani has sent his Mercatoni Uno riders to the front to drive the race, while up at the breakaway there's been a little bit of a change, because Freddy Gonzalez, the leader in the King of the Mountains, among others, has joined the break. But it looks as though, Bob, the effort, this is Dario Munoz here, the effort by Pantani's team has virtually closed it all down.
It's almost all back together right now. The Mercatoni Uno teammates of Marco Pantani on the front of the bike race to control the tempo in the peloton with his teammates. That's very interesting. We'll have to see if Pantani is back into the days of old when he was one of the best bike racers in the history of the sport. Here's the composition of the Mercatoni Uno team. Along with Pantani, there's Conti, very experienced, Codol, Clavero, his roommate and longtime teammate, Fontanelli, a very good bike racer, Gasperoni, Ravaioli, and Manzoni as well.
There's Marco Pantani right now, 141, and strangely enough, riding a very confident early few stages of the Giro d'Italia. Is at the moment 26th overall, about half a minute behind, but the way he's riding with such confidence, and that really boosts the morale of the team, and they will get around him after that little strange tactics he was adopting yesterday, and I think that was really just to try and put a nail into the coffin of Mario Cipollini over the last few kilometres. Obviously no love lost at all, because after all we did have that little story during the winter changeover season that maybe Cipollini and Pantani were going to ride on the same team, and I think probably Mario Cipollini put the blocks on that one, Phil.
It never happened anyway, that's for sure. But Pantani got his legs yesterday on the climb. He obviously felt good, and today, well, I wonder, are we going to see him feature in the finish today as we climb up to the top? It's not a mountaintop finish by no manner of means today, but there are 5 of them in this year's Giro d'Italia, so we can expect to see Pantani try on the steep climbs, we hope. This is the breakaway. It's getting bigger and bigger. We've lost Julian Wynne, who was in it. The man that started it, Iliano, has gone, but he got this rider away, the team leader in the mountains, Munoz, who's driving now on the front of this group. I'm just straining to look over the shoulder. It looks, Bob, as though they may... Oh, no, there they are. They're right behind.
They're just about on the wheel now. Here we see the back of the peloton. We might see some of the riders starting to get trailed off right now, and that's Graham Brown, the fast sprinter of the Panaria team, doing quite well so far to stay within the front of the bike race. If he can keep himself there all the way to the finish line, we might see him up there with Figueras and Pataki if he can stay on, and Robbie McEwen, who honestly climbed very well in yesterday's stage.
Well, looking at the front end of the main field there, Bob, I still feel it's a bit strange to see Marco Pantani's team assuming the control of the pacemaking on the front end of the main field. I don't see Marco Pantani as a big possible winner of this bike race right now, and he's riding as if he's the leader of the event.
Yes, that's absolutely true, and he may be using his team to get publicity early on before we get to the serious mountains, and that would be a way to pay back probably the most faithful sponsor in the history of cycling. Mercatoni Uno has stood by Marco Pantani through thick and thin, and it would be a wonderful payback for him to be able to get some results eventually and do his sponsor right. Here we go, some more attacks at the front of the bike race. We're getting close by the King of the Mountain sprint now. You can see the green jersey on the right-hand side of the screen there. That's Freddy Gonzalez. He'll be trying to go for some more points here. Dario Hernan Munoz on the front right now, putting in a huge effort to try to stay away from the charging peloton.
Well, you mentioned Mercatoni being the most faithful sponsor. Well, I'd have to say that's probably just in Italy, because the most faithful sponsor is the one who's got a rider on the front of that break right now, Team Kelme, who've been in the sport for more than 25 years, although they have struggled to keep the team together over the last couple of years because they've spent the habit of developing a lot of good bike riders, and as soon as somebody comes to the top of the ladder, it gets taken across and switched across to a new team. Last year, for example, losing Botero was a major blow to this team, and of course we all know Roberto Heras as well switched across to US Postal. Well, that's a bit sketchy, wasn't it, Bob?
They're going so fast up this climb, they barely made it around that corner. Let's not forget about Aitor Gonzalez, who won the Volta for Kelme last year and now races for the Italian team Fossa Bortolo and is one of our pre-race favorites in this Giro d'Italia.
Well, we're watching the first big fast climb of the day of the tour, and we're not far from the summit now. As we come up towards this, the man that wins this will become the automatic leader of the King of the Mountains, or should I say it probably increases overall lead, because that was Freddy Gonzalez who's got the green jersey on already. He's gone and got maximum points again.
Well, he obviously knows what he's looking to do at the moment. You can see the main field still keeping in contact. They're about 15 seconds in arrears. We get a chance here to look and see if anyone has actually disappeared. I expected there to be a lot more of an explosion in the main field today, and we're looking at the back end of the peloton. We saw Graham Brown a few moments ago. He has in fact managed to stay in contact with the peloton, which is a surprise, and maybe Mario Cipollini has as well. Looking at the profile of the stage, I expected a lot of the sprinters to get left behind on this climb.
Well, once we're over the top of the hill, it leaves 36 kilometres of today's stage, about 22 miles still to race. It is not all downhill from now on, a little bit of undulations, but we do ripple up again before the finish today. But amazingly, this longer climb and climbed very rapidly indeed, has not caught the peloton off its guard as much as the climb did yesterday, which was a lower category, only third category climb. And we lost Mario Cipollini among others as they were tailed off on that climb yesterday. Well, the fielder over the top, Freddy Gonzalez, increases his lead in the King of the Mountains. He won that title, by the way, back in 2001. As we go down towards the finish, don't go too far away, we'll take a break. And welcome back, just in time, because there's another flurry of attacks now as the riders start to move into the final 29 kilometres to the finishing line, and they stay in the hills now. This is Alexis Rodriguez from the Kelme team, who's having a little dig. We've just caught a glimpse, Paul, of Tessato in trouble. So that crash he had just before in training is obviously affecting him.
He's going to have a very difficult first week of the Giro, but he is a very courageous bike rider, and everybody wants to ride a big bike race if they can, and he, I think, will recover. We're just looking back here at the acceleration of Freddy Rodriguez, getting himself maximum points for the second time in 2 days. That was coming across the line behind him, Gryshenko, and Tiralongo in third place, getting himself for the first time some points in the King of the Mountains competition. This is a very interesting move, though, from Alexis Rodriguez, the Kelme rider. Kelme sending a rather weakened team this year, I think, to the Giro d'Italia, but they are a team, aren't they, Bob, who are always looking for the opportunity and never afraid of attacking on a profile like this.
Never afraid to attack in the mountains, the Kelme team. Alexis Rodriguez trying to get some distance between himself and the peloton. Only 8 riders on the squad at the start of the Giro d'Italia. Did not have enough guys even to come to the race for a full complement of the 9 riders, but they decided to start with 8 anyways, and Alexis Rodriguez is trying to make the most of it right now.
Well, you can't keep a good Kelme man out of the action. There's a little bit of a longer view for you of the result of that King of the Mountains, with Gonzalez taking the prize. Gryshenko, by the way, rides for Lambau credit, and Tiralongo is a Planaria rider, Paolo Tiralongo. That's the result. A little bit of reshuffle again at the top here now as Mario Cipollini is down there.
Well, Cipollini's looking to keep himself in contention there. We're looking a little further up the road, and you can see the team cars are being sent forward right now, but Cipollini's group is not very much more than about 25 seconds off the back end of the main field. But Bob, these next few kilometres are rather unfortunate for the men who get dropped on that climb, because it's not flat, there is no descent, and it undulates, and in fact we climb up to the high spot, which is about 200 metres higher than the King of the Mountains point. The high spot coming up in around about 10-15 kilometres time.
Yes, absolutely. We said this might happen during the early parts of the bike race, that once they get to the King of the Mountain, that's not the end of the climbing. The road does continue to roll on to the finish. There are a lot of climbs before we swoop down into Terme Luigiane, and Cipollini now just off the back. He's within the race caravan, though, and if he can stay close to the cars, he can use them to slingshot himself back in the peloton, and he's still in for a chance with the stage win, as are a lot of the sprinters are still up in the front group. Cipollini having a really hard time on the climbs, and I'm surprised to see that. In last year's Giro, he didn't seem to have any trouble at all with climbs of this nature, but this year is a different story. He's really struggling every time the road points upwards.
Well, everyone says it's always difficult to wear the rainbow jersey. Conte on the front here for, again, Marco Pantani. Julio Perez riding a very attentive bike race, but maybe thinking more about his team leader, Giuliano Figueras, today, who's got a very good chance of becoming the new leader of this bike race. But I'm surprised, Bob, at this climb so far, because it hasn't really done the damage we expected. 11 kilometres and still a lot of big riders in contention.
Well, we saw Graham Brown still in the front group. I'm sure Robbie McEwen is still up there as well. Giuliano Figueras, we haven't seen the pink jersey, but I'm sure he's still right in here, and that's a great effort by Alessandro Pataki, who looked to be in a little bit of danger of losing the pink jersey after yesterday's climb. He was so tired at the finish he couldn't even sprint, wound up 4th on the stage, and by vent of the time he got into Intergiro earlier on yesterday's stage, he was able to keep the jersey just a few seconds over Fabio Baldato. We haven't seen a picture of Baldato yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was still in this bike race right at the front, and they'll be all fighting it out for a sprint in the finish area, and we'll see if Cipollini can get back into the front of the bike race, and then it'll be another field sprint for us. But at the point right now of the bike race, Cipollini a little bit off the back, but still within the race caravan, and they haven't done enough work to get Cipollini off the back yet. Maybe that's why we still see Roberto Conte of the Mercatoni Uno team of Marco Pantani still at the front of the bike race, still making a pretty hard tempo.
Well, just off the front there, Alexis Rodriguez. Now, it's worth having a look at the Panaria lineup, I think, because they're the team doing a lot of work, and I think they are now trying to get their leader, number 21 there, Giuliano Figueras, into the pink jersey today. There's a 20-second win bonus today, of course, and he's only 23 seconds off the race lead, so he just needs to get those 3 seconds between him and the pink jersey of Pataki. And I think that is their plan today, to bring some publicity to the team. And there is Pataki in the pink jersey there as well, and he didn't expect to ride well today, you know. Sorry about the little bit of picture breakup. As you can see now, it's on the front camera with the leader, as we now see a counter-attack coming. It wouldn't surprise you if that's not Frédéric Guédon, who is also trying to move up now. This race is continuing to split up. I can't see a bunch sprint today, but you never know. But I still feel as though Kelme might pull off something special. We'll take another short break. Do rejoin us, and we won't be far away. And welcome back. As we just passed by 25 kilometres to go there, we are now looking at a reformation of the lead group. And in fact, Alexis Rodriguez has been joined here by, among others, Giovanni Lombardi, tagged on to the back and keeps looking over his shoulder. But this is a big breakaway, Bob.
This is a very good breakaway, especially from Lombardi himself, a very fast sprinter. Won a stage like this in the rain in last year's Giro, very similar to this, where he got onto the back of a breakaway, protecting the interests of his teammate Mario Cipollini, was not required to work at all, had very fresh legs, won the stage. I'm sure that right now he's just measuring the riders in the front. He won't do any work at all in the breakaway, so Mario Cipollini might still have a chance to come back. Then he'd have fresh enough legs to lead him out in the sprint finish. We'll see if it continues to break up like this and come back together. Cipollini, in the meantime, a desperate chase going on behind this breakaway from the peloton and the riders behind that have been dropped.
Well, this is Jordi Riera, the man who started the action a little earlier at the wrong end of the main field right now. He was one of the early riders to join a break. Of the big climb of the day, but right now this is rather an interesting move to see Giovanni Lombardi getting himself into this breakaway situation. Sandy Cassar is the Française de Jeu rider there, and not surprisingly there are 2 riders in this group from Kelme, a very attentive team on this kind of terrain. They're looking for the breakaway because that's their biggest chance. Interesting as well, I think, to note that Pataki has got over the climb today, and he will hope that the whole of this race comes back together so he can keep himself in the pink jersey for one more day. But I think 1 or 2 riders will be surprised by the severity of the finish, which does climb up for the last 1,800 metres, which is more than a mile.
Well, there's 9 of them got away. We haven't yet had a motorbike in amongst them, but we can tell you that Rodriguez has certainly been joined by Giovanni Lombardi, Luca Manzanti, Sandy Cassar and Denis Lungi. They got across the cap as individuals when they joined up at the front there, and as we can pick up the numbers and names, and we'll give them to you. But there are 9 of them trying to break the elastic just at the moment, Bob. And this is a big composition of different teams. It will have a chance, I think.
It will have a chance. All of these riders' teammates will be sitting on, not doing any work. Denis Lungi won a very opportunistic stage in the Giro last year. It was a beautiful little stage win. He's gone over to the larger Alessio team from the very small Denardi team. They are still in the bike race, but the Alessio team, very strong, got a stage win yesterday with Baldato, and maybe add another one with last year's stage winner, Denis Lungi.
Well, there is a second group on the road now, and I think that's where the camera is. That's the second group, just ahead of the main peloton. This is the main peloton. As you can see, it's very difficult now to get our pictures here because the helicopter's having a job holding them, especially in the forest that we're in just now, and our motorcycles can't obviously move up while the riders are descending like this. But there are 9 riders clear. I think the group chasing is slightly larger, probably 12 or 13, and they're just about 11 seconds ahead of the field. And we're looking down now on what is the second group on the road, and it's quite a large group, Paul.
It's a very large group, but it's all pretty close together right now, only 16 seconds separating almost the whole bike race. Interesting to note that the group of the Maglia Rosa, Alessandro Pataki, are not too far off the back of the counter-attackers, and I think he'll be quite happy with his day. These are excellent racing roads. They're very tortuous, very technical roads as well. They're undulating. For the moment, the rider's taking the advantage of a slight descent, so we're pushing the pace up to around about 45-50 miles an hour. I think for the moment, Bob, on a course like this, the advantage would go to the small breakaway off the front.
Yes, it's very hard to get an organized chase from a team behind and make any progress towards the front of the bike race because gravity has taken over. The riders in the front sweeping through the turns, much like downhill ski racers at this point now. You can see a chase coming on here. That's towards the back of the peloton. They'll be trying to get across to this right here, which looks like the lead of the bike race. That looks like Fabio Sacchi, and that's our pink jersey of Alessandro Petacchi right now. So this will be a chase group coming back to the front of the bike race. Fabio Sacchi doing a big effort there. So perhaps Gilberto Simoni is a little bit behind the bike race.
No, this is I think this is a group of 11, and Petacchi's got himself into it, Bob. If the camera can pull back and reveal 11 riders, that's the composition of the second group on the road now, and ahead of the peloton. Mind you, we're lost in the woods, let's face it.
Yes, it's very confusing right now where the front of the bike race is, the middle, and who's chasing to come back on. This is a very big group, perhaps in the middle of the bike race right
this
now.
Is too big a group. This isn't the chase group of 11 now.
The situation right now is we've got that leading group, a small group of counter-attackers, then going back to what is the main field, and this is the Gruppo Maglia Rosa we're looking at right now. It looked very much as if a bit of help coming in there from the Seiko team to try and pull it all back together. But Fabio Sacchi is in a second group on the road. It is all pretty confusing, especially on roads like this, very reminiscent of the kind of information we get fed back at the race like Paris-Roubaix. These narrow roads, Phil, are so difficult. But I think for the moment it's two groups off the front and the main field with the pink jersey.
That's how I see it as well, as they're all gradually coming together anyway, but we still very definitely have 9 riders out in front, and possible a win coming the way for Giovanni Lombardi. The main field might have a different view on that. As the race fights out to the final kilometres, we'll take another very quick break. Join us soon. The Giro d'Italia, and it says there, the Cipollini group, Paul, is now 1 minute and 21 behind.
So they're going to have a hard time because these are certainly not downhill roads all the way to the finish. They're undulating roads, tricky roads, technical roads, and the advantage to the attackers. Cipollini was at the front end of the group trying to stir up some pacemaking to try and pull himself back in with a chance once again to try and equal the record of Alfredo Binda. And I would say, Bob, he's feeling a little worried about his chances of doing that because he certainly doesn't seem to be firing on all cylinders this year.
He doesn't seem to have the great form that he experienced last year when he won 6 stages, Milano-San Remo, Ghent-Wevelgem, and the World Championships. Seems to be struggling a little bit, perhaps a few too many banquets in the off-season, celebrating his rainbow stripes. He's not wearing them today. He has the Intergiro jersey on. They said they might kick him out of the race if he continued to refuse to wear any of the classification jerseys. He said before the start of the Giro d'Italia he'd only swap the World Champions jersey for the pink jersey of race leader. He will not get that on this bike race. He's already almost 7 minutes behind on GC, but he could still get some stages, but he is not doing a very good job of climbing the hills so far. He's had a desperate chase the last 2 days, and today is no exception. He's trying to catch back on. He was 1 minute and 20 seconds behind the first guys through the 20Ks to go banner, but only about 30 seconds behind the race caravan. So if he can catch into those cars, he can slingshot his way back into the front of the bike race. It looks like Fabio Sacchi on the Cannondale bike on the Seiko team. We're not exactly sure exactly what part of the bike race that might be, but this is probably the main group, the whole peloton, and it seems to start regrouping now in the front of the bike race.
All together, Fabio Sacchi, who seems to have allowed his little beaver beard there to go back to its normal colour. It was bleached white when we saw him in Langkawi and in the Tour Down Under in Australia in January. He's a very strong man. The team keep him, Paul, because his form never seems to go off form. He just keeps that lovely steady form. He's so reliable.
It's one of those very rare riders who is able to keep the form throughout the length of the season, and those are riders who are very valuable when you're putting a team together, because you need some riders who can peak for certain objectives throughout the season, but you also need a man who you can count on all occasions. Moving up into second place there is Cristian Moreni as well. He's a fairly good descender. He's riding at the front end of the main field, and what they're trying to do right now as we go through 15 kilometres to go is try and split this very large group that has formed here. There you can see Moreni, where's number 7. He's in second place right now. We did see a little earlier on a nice move coming from the leader of the bike race, and there he is. He's actually moving himself to the front end. In this group as well is Gilberto Simoni. He wears number 151. He is a man who is looking to win this bike race overall, but I think there's been a general regrouping on the descent here right now. As you can see, this is a fairly large group, but there are not very many cars in at the back there, indicating that the team managers' cars have not yet been able to come by. Although the gap is 1 minute, the roads really are not favourable to bring the team managers' cars into the gap right now.
At the moment we are plunging from 700 metres, the high spot on the route today, down to 13 metres above sea level, and then we climb back up towards the finish, which sits at 118 metres. So this is a very, very tricky course now. They seem to have swept up that breakaway of 9. Cipollini's group, I don't think they're going to get back on this sort of a course. They're 1 minute and 21 seconds back at the last time check. And the following cars are probably trapped in amongst the riders too, because they're not going to do much overtaking on these roads.
Well, they won't let them come by. It's too dangerous to try and get the team managers, and the team managers will be at the back of the Cipollini group right now, hands on the horns, won't they, Bob, trying to get through there, trying to go forward, because they realise a flat tyre at a moment like this is a very dangerous thing, because the fact is you're not supported by your team, and when you get a wheel from the neutral surface, sometimes it can cause a problem, because a lot of teams have not all switched across to 10 speed right now, and if you get the wrong cluster in there, well, you can lose any chance today of winning the Giro d'Italia.
Well, the pitch of the chain for the different gear clusters would be different also, so they won't integrate 9-speed and 10-speed. You have to use a narrower chain for the 10-speed cogs, and you wouldn't be able to shift any gears. You might lose a lot of time. You might be slipping gears all the way to the finish line. We have 4 different cameras going right now. They don't seem to be racing that quickly on the front of the bike race, and I guarantee you there's a desperate chase going on behind Mario Cipollini, an absolutely fantastic descender, daredevil at the breakneck speeds. If he catches on and wins a stage, it will be really something to see, and I'm sure he's still chasing hard. One man that's not helping him, though, is Giovanni Lombardi. We saw him right in the front of the bike race. He might take his own chances in this sprint if Cipollini doesn't catch up, but we saw Pataki right at the front. He seems to have much better legs than he did yesterday, and he might challenge for another stage win today to consolidate his lead in the pink jersey competition for the moment.
Well, they're wonderful pictures, and thank heavens we've got a helicopter, because otherwise we wouldn't be seeing very much now. Our cameras are trapped down there, but the helicopter giving us some wonderful images. I noted there, Bob, that Fabio Baldato, who won yesterday, is the very last man on this long line of riders.
He's in the points jersey. It's a purple, off purple. Sometimes we mistake it for the pink jersey because they're so very similar in color. All the jerseys being designed by Italian artist Ugo Nespolo in the off-season. They have a new logo and a new look to all the jerseys, but now the pink jersey and the point jerseys are very similar. Baldato in the points and Pataki in the pink, 2 sprinters. And where's Mario Cipollini? He's in the blue jersey of the Inter-Giro.
Well, he's in the group behind at about 1 minute and 10 seconds for the moment, and as Bob said earlier, he will be taking all kinds of risks, and he will have 1 or 2 serious teammates around him. This is not a real rip-roaring descent right now. The front end of the main field, I think these guys are just descending to make sure that they get around these corners safely. There's no real serious attacks as we're inside of 15 kilometres to go, and as I say that, here's a serious move.
It looks as though that's an Alessio rider there having a go. I don't think it's Marini.
It's a Lotto rider. I think it may well be a move coming from a man like Rick Verbrugge, who said he felt he had a good chance on a course like this today, but it certainly is one of the Lotto Domo riders coming out of the front of the pack.
He's got the style of Rick Verbrugge, but I don't think he's going to push his luck here. They're not going to take too many chances on the way down what is turning out to be a very tortuous descent, and they can't afford to make a mistake down here, so they're going to be very tense bike riders as they come off the high spot of the day.
Lotto might be doing a little bit of tempo to prevent Mario Cipollini from coming back into the bike race, giving Robbie McEwen a much better chance to win the sprint.
Well, it is a Verbrugge, but I think it's Leif Verbrugge, the brother, who's making the descent here, just in the lead, taking a chance. Remember, brother Rick has done the fastest ever prologue, and now are we going to see his number and be sure? No, we're not. I don't know how our cameras could even hold this man steady. In fact, it's Robbie McEwen. I don't believe it. It is Robbie McEwen who's... Well, if he won today, Bob, what would we say? Well, there we have it. Robbie McEwen, the sprinter, attacking on his way downhill. Will he stay away? Well, we'll have to take our break, but find out when we get back. And welcome back to the Giro d'Italia. We are now down in the far south. We're looking here at one Australian, Scott Sunderland, as he makes his way rather gently down the mountain, but he's not in the lead. But as far as we know, and here he is, Paul, Robbie McEwen is clear with 9 kilometres to go.
Well, it's pretty impressive. You know, sprinters are an unbelievable breed of bike riders, and what they will do on many occasions is they will get so angry at the referees with a decision like that one yesterday. McEwen believes that he was completely right in deviating from his line, and right now he's taken an incredible risk of charging off the front here, Phil, trying to get himself a lone victory on a descent, which to me was very reminiscent of the Poggio and Milan-San Remo, Bob.
24 seconds down on GC. If he gets a few seconds before the finish line, plus the time bonus, he'll take over over the pink jersey. I think that's why we saw Alessandro Patacchi putting his hand up and begging his teammates to come back to the front of the bike race, try to close the gap down to Robbie McEwen. But right now he sent a shockwave into the peloton. Very torturous descent leading to the flat rows before the finish line, and it was a really incredible descent. Also, the Domina Vacanze riders back on the front of the bike race. I think Mario Cipollini might have caught in himself.
Well, I can never remember a single occasion, and I'm a pretty good friend of Robbie McEwen. I've known him since his amateur days. I can never remember Robbie making a move like this, ever.
Well, a lot of sprinters don't do that. We did see Mario Cipollini last year in Ghent-Wevelgem leaping out of the pack to get himself the victory from a breakaway situation, and all the Italian journalists at the time said they could never remember Cipollini making a long break like that either. So it is rather a strange move by Robbie, but because of all the infighting going on with the Italians at the moment, it may well be that Robbie McEwen will cause a surprise. His advantage, just 10 seconds. He will get a shock, I think, though, Phil, when he gets up to the final few kilometres, because it's a long drag up to the finish line. But it's a brave move by Robbie, and just wants to say something to the referees, I think.
Well, he's 8 kilometres as far as we can ascertain from the line right now, and the road keeps kicking around. This is a brilliantly brave move by Robbie McEwen, and he'll make himself a lot of friends because of the way he's riding this race today. Wipes away the memories of 3 years ago, Bob, when he was disqualified out of the race for taking a tow.
He was holding on the car over the Gavia pass, and I've climbed that pass in the race. Actually, it was in the snow, but I can't really blame him for holding onto the car for a while. That is an incredible climb. Now it looks like he's going to be caught, but that was a crazy effort by him on the descent. What he needs to be doing is sitting on his teammates' wheels, just marking the pace of the group as they go down the mountains. But maybe he just wanted to get out in front and stay out of trouble, because there were quite a few torturous corners on that long descent up to the coastline now, and it'll be a big sprint into the finish. We'll see if Cipollini's been able to catch back up. We pan back now. Fossa Bortolo on the front of the bike race, defending the lead of their man Alessandro Patacchi.
10 or 12 seconds, Paul, and it looks as though Lombardy is still in with a shout here.
There's a lot of chatting going on there to the team management as well, back in the cars behind, because it looked very much as if Marco Vello was talking back to the team management to see just exactly what they wanted to happen here. Team of Mario Cipollini, Domina Vacanze, have got 4 or 5 riders at the front end of the main field. There's the yellow jersey. He's very comfortably at the front end of the pack. But nobody yet taking the responsibility of chasing down Robbie McEwen, and that, I think, Phil, would give him the advantage of stretching out his lead by a few more seconds.
Well, just looking down at the Fossa Bortolo team there, it looks as though they've got themselves organised again just at the moment. It's Dario Cioni and I think it's Brusigin, the 2 riders there from Faso. These are lovely pictures coming out of the helicopters of this beautiful part of the world. Little left turn here. McEwen has a lead of approximately 12 seconds. And now let's, this is where we're going, by the way, today, Terme Luigiani. And these are the men who've won here before. The great Laurent Jalabert seems to have won just about everywhere. Maurizio Fondrias, former world champion, also a winner up here. It is a slight hill finish, but it's certainly not one that would break McEwen. He could do it here.
Well, he could do it, but you can see on the front end of the main field some serious organisation happening right now as we get the Fossa Bortolo riders on the front. They want to keep their man there in pink for at least another day right now. If we can have a look further down the main field, it would be interesting to see whether or not Mario Cipollini had reintegrated the peloton on that descent. We haven't seen him riding to the front end of the pack just yet, Bob. He's wearing the blue jersey of the leader of the Inter-Giro competition, and if he does want to try and win this stage, well, he'd have to move to the front pretty rapidly.
Baldato still at the back. I think you're a bit ambitious there, Paul, to expect to see Cipollini come through the pack up this climb.
No, I was saying that it would be interesting to see whether he'd made contact on the descent just before we got to this final climb, because he will have taken some serious risks. And no, I don't think he would ride through the pack on a climb like this, but he would have had to be in the top 10 or 15 places if he was looking to try and get the stage win right now. But you can see Faso, they want to make sure that Alessandro Patacchi keeps the pink jersey on his shoulders for another day. And Robbie McEwen, I think, well, his chances of victory are over right now, because the boys in white are right on his tail.
We'll have to see how much energy he's expended in this little breakaway. Fossa Bortolo chasing him down there. If he's put a lot of effort into this little breakaway that he was in, then he might be gassed, a little bit out of breath before the finish line. If he, however, just went down the front in the descents and didn't put too much effort into it. Here's Cipollini now, looking there like he's in the group. It would seem if they're on the same climb as leaders, they're a little bit further behind. Looks like some of the riders not really trying that hard to catch back up. And it's an incredible bike race. Cipollini not giving up yet. He's got the sleeves rolled up. There's also the king of the mountain in this group.
Done his job for the day, I guess.
I think they're done for the day, and here's the front of the bike race. It must be quite a big group that was dropped off the back on that descent, and they are racing flat out. They've just caught McEwen again to be a little bit out of breath for the sprint, so let's look for Pataki to be reinvigorated. Giovanni Lombardi riding very close to the front of the bike race also, as well as Fabio Baldato, still in there with a chance. It's going to be a real dogfight at the finish, and Pataki hanging on tenaciously to that pink jersey. He really loves being in that. He was so thrilled to get a stage win, and Fossa Bortolo is having a great Giro so far.
Dario Chioni sitting there at the front, and Bruchagin is the rider in second place. They're the workhorses, but I'd be very worried about Giovanni Lombardi now riding third wheel. He's no responsibility to Cipollini today. There he is. Well, that wasn't him actually. He's tucked out of our sight at the moment. But he is a real candidate for taking this one.
Well, he certainly is. He's a man who, when given a free card, has got one of the fastest sprints in the main field. He normally, though, uses his sprint from 500 metres to go to 300 metres to go to set up the sprints for Mario Cipollini. When he does have a free hand, he certainly does like to try and get a win. Cipollini, I think, may well have just caught back the main peloton on the descent, but it was a little bit too late for him, because as they start the climb, the final climb up to the finishing line, it's all over for Super Mario, and it may well be that he'll get his win in a couple of days' time when this race pops across to the island of Sicily, and that will be on stage 5 and a very difficult stage into Catania.
Still sat at the back here, the man in the Ciclamino jersey. No, he's not. He's one in front now. Fabio Baldato just happy to be riding home with the peloton, I think, today after his victory yesterday. There's another little twister as they come off this little ridge as well, isn't it? A beautiful area to live down here in the far south of Italy. Well, Lombardi won his stage. It was the 6th stage. He won in Varese last year. He's now trying to make it the 3rd stage here. He is riding very well. He's got good condition. And, you know, the way that the Fassa riders are riding as well, they've got confidence that Pataki, on a day when he thought he would lose the jersey, has suddenly realised that he has more than a good chance of not just keeping it, but if he wins the stage, he'll increase his lead.
The main field once again has seriously split. In fact, the race, I think, had come all back together after that descent. It's starting to split up again, and we're seeing a group of about 50 or 60 riders going off the front end of the main field. This will be a great operation for Pataki today, because he will almost certainly have a very good crack at keeping the pink jersey, and his two teammates I would expect to be in that group as well. Dario Frigo, one of the big leaders of Fossa Bortolo, and in this group also Aitor Gonzalez, the man who they think has got a great chance of taking the overall win in the Giro d'Italia after winning the Vuelta last season.
These two boys are doing a great job for the team, Bob.
Dario Cioni, a fantastic bike racer, mountain bike racer, just a couple of years ago. Came over to the roadside on the CSC team of Tyler Hamilton. Did great teamwork in the Giro last year, and he's back in the front of this bike race defending the pink jersey again that he did for Cadel Evans on the Mappé team, last year. Dario Cioni, he's a good bike racer, and he's very good at these descents. He's back in the front on a very torturous descent. David Dario Cioni, he's spent a lot of time at a good friend of mine's house in Gunnison, Colorado, David Weens, when he was a mountain bike racer. And hello to everybody in Gunnison, Colorado.
Well, he's like a lot of mountain bike riders now. They're becoming very impressive road racing cyclists amongst the professionals. As the riders now continue, this is Mario Cipollini cruising into the coast, watching his beloved beach on the right there as he makes his way gently towards the finish, losing ground now on what is about, as Paula said, it could be about 70 strong, I suppose, the peloton. But it contained, as far as we know, the men that really matter. And Alessandro Pataki could be looking to take this out, because his teammates have been told to ride at the front until their legs come off and then see what he can do. 3 kilometres to go.
Well, this is looking seriously like a big possibility here for our man Pataki to get himself another win. If you want to find out all the stories that are going on around the back end of the Giro d'Italia, well, log on to our website, chat, on Wednesday evening, May the 14th, from 7 till 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and that's just before the highlight programme goes out, and we'll answer any of the questions you can throw at us. And if you're looking for humour, well, don't forget Bob Roll's going to be with Phil and myself.
Now, there's a number of these tunnels now as we run down to the coast, and in fact there is one tunnel of 120 metres in length in about the last 2 kilometres of the race, and that could turn out to be quite a hazard.
We should be going into it any moment now. It's 2.5 kilometres to go, and they're always a bit sketchy, and Bob will admit that they are a scary thing to go through on a bike at speed, because from light, all of a sudden, it's as if somebody turns out the lights.
It is a very dodgy moment, especially if you have the dark sunglasses on. You go into the tunnel, and then you have to take those sunglasses off. We'll see how well they're lit. It's been taken over at the front of the bike race. 1 kilometre to go now, and it looks like Giovanni Lombardi has put 2 of his teammates on the front of the bike race, and he's going to take his chance in the absence of Mario Cipollini to get a stage win himself. He is a very fast bike racer, and I have the feeling that at times, if he didn't pull off for Cipollini, he could actually win some of the stages himself. He's right there in 2nd position, or maybe 4th position there. There's a Falsa Bortolo rider in between the 2 leading Domina Vacanze team riders on the front of the bike race.
Well, that was the tunnel then that we saw out there at 2.5k. That was a really fast 1.5k. We are presuming that our direction coming from Italy is telling us the truth. There was certainly a banner down there, but I'm not sure it was the final kilometre banner. Anyway, the train is on, and Lombardi is 3 or 4 men down this line, and so too, and there is the 1 kilometre. That's a bit more realistic now. As we look now with the pink jersey in with a real chance, Paul.
Pink jersey's right up there, and I don't think Mario Cipollini will enjoy these pictures tonight, Phil, when he looks at them back at the hotel room, because the team have got a complete organisation on the front end of the peloton. Mario Cipollini should be there with them, because this is how you lead out the sprint. But today it's not for Mario Cipollini, it's for Giovanni Lombardi. But Alessandro Patacchi in about 6th position is looking very good indeed.
Lombardi in 3rd place there. It's being led out by Domina Vacanze with a Falsa Bortolo rider in 2nd position. And you can see the pink jersey just in about 5th spot right there. That would be Alessandro Patacchi.
You can see now as they come into the last 500 metres of today's stage, this is the little climb now, which will just possibly slow down the sprinters. That's the pacemaking swinging off there now. Excellent work by the riders from Domina Vacanze. And still now, it's almost going to be a slow-motion sprint, this, because nobody wants to take up the running at all. I think that's Bongiorno in there too for the Paneria team, but watch for the rider in pink. They're trying to lead out, the Zebra boys are trying to lead out Giovanni Lombardi. He looks for the stage win when he's given up his duties for Mario Cipollini, but Patacchi is poised to take a 2nd stage win in 3 days here. He is a tremendous sprinter at the best of times, and I can't see anybody beating him. As the sprint now starts for the line, they're leading out the boy in pink. There's a time bonus of 20 seconds on a day when he was expecting to lose the pink jersey. He could well be increasing his overall lead. The first 3 get the time bonuses now as he starts the sprint on the left of the picture. Casagrande also getting in on the picture there, and there's a surprise, but he's showing terrific form, and I think that Patacchi may not have the legs here. And there's a rider coming away. Now, I'll have to give you his name when I find it out myself, but it looks to me as though it might be Garzelli. We'll check it out, but it could have been Garzelli. That'll be a great coup if it was, Bob.
I think it was a 10X rider, if I'm not mistaken. I know.
There you are. We can see it anyway now. So it is, in fact, Stefano Garzelli. And hats off to Paul Sherwen for that one. Stefano Garzelli has pulled a good coup there. Remember, he was one of the men who lost time on day 1, but he's just got it all back with a 20 seconds time bonus.
Well, that's unbelievable, Phil. After such a long period of time out of the sport, he really has come back. He got a win on the 1st stage of the Giro del Trentino, and that was a superbly timed acceleration. This was the kind of sprint for him today. Very similar to the finish that he got in Ans just outside of Liège last year in the early part of the Giro d'Italia. And I think that announces that Stefano Garzelli is a serious challenger now for the overall victory. And here he's very happy to tell the crowds and the press about his win. Mario Cipollini, well, he won't get 41 wins today, and he will just cruise in and think about what's going to happen in a few days' time. But definitely, Bob, a great win by Garzelli.
That was a fantastic effort. Very hard-fought win by Stefano Garzelli. That was almost a slow-motion sprint, and the sprinters being beaten by a climber because the road did kick up at the end. Garzelli, with a fair amount of power himself, came around there at the very last moment. It was such an exciting finish, and it's great to see Garzelli back in the front of the Giro d'Italia and in front of the Italian public.
Well, Stefano Garzelli, who won 2 stages last year, that was before he was disqualified for the use of the forbidden drug probenecid. He lost those 2 stages, by the way, because of that. Gets a win now. And it was Casagrande there who finally came up there in 2nd place. The pink jersey in the frame as well. So a very good result in the end for the big boys in this race. Marco Pantani, look at that. He's come across the line in 16th place, beginning to look like a man who is finding his form. So the Giro d'Italia has come to rest for day 3, and the big stars are now beginning to fire their guns. Meanwhile, Mario Cipollini making a gentle ride up there alongside the leader in the King of the Mountains, Freddy Gonzalez. We're now really down in the south. Look at those beautiful waters down there. We'll take a short break. Do rejoin us, and we'll go through all the prize presentations with you. See you in a moment. Drugs. He has established himself in just 3 days now as a man for this race. Out on the course, Freddy Gonzalez increased his lead in the King of the Mountains. And at the finish, Mario Cipollini, well, he lost almost 5 minutes. Alessandro Petacchi still leads overall as the Giro d'Italia continues next on OLN. Yes, the Giro is now in the far south. The weather may be overcast. It's still very hot and humid. And tomorrow the rise will go off the mainland onto the island of Sicily. But not today. 4 more hours in the saddle and 170 kilometres to come. Hello again, everybody. I'm Phil Liggett. Welcome back. It's our 4th day of coverage of the Giro d'Italia. Alongside me, the boys looking extremely smart, Paul Sherwen and Bob Roll. Welcome, guys. Well, yesterday, towards the end of the stage, on those nasty descents down into the finishing town, Rick Verbrugge of Belgium did crash, and because of his injuries, is out of the race today, and we're rather sad about that. These are pictures taken 2 years ago when he won the prologue time trial in happier circumstance. He was setting what still is the record for the prologue time trial, but I have to say today heading back to Belgium. That's sad for Robbie McEwen on the Lotto. But the man everybody's talking about, of course, is Italian, Stefano Garzelli. Paul, he's back.
Absolutely remarkable, Phil. Let's not forget, go back 12 months. He started the Giro in fine form. 2 stage wins, the pink jersey, and then the bombshell, the positive test for probenecid. He has festered, I would say, for the last 12 months, trying to dream about the day that he could come back to the Giro d'Italia, and he did that yesterday with a win and a chance to get himself up onto the podium. But I think the most interesting thing now is he's actually setting himself up, Phil, as a possible winner of this bike race. And the important thing is, it's so hard to have 12 months out of the sport. He went back and looked at his diary from the previous year and actually matched it perfectly to the number of miles that he did, and that is really quite remarkable.
Yes, it is. Well, he's won it before, so who knows, he might get to feel victory again in Milan. Long way away, Bob. The man who's also festering for bad performances, I suppose, is Mario Cipollini. Can we talk him into a win today?
I hope so. He's had 3 chances to win a stage. Yesterday's not a great chance, but still, in years gone by, he would not have let that slip out of his grasp. He's had his first stage, he was pipped on the line by Petacchi. He should have won that. He had a perfect lead out. Then he was dropped into the run-in on the stage. After that, stage 2, there was almost all the sprinters besides him made it to the finish line to contest a sprint. Cipollini was dropped on the hills before that, and it might be finally the monster that is time has got its hooks deep into Mar-E-O Speed Dragon. We might have seen the end of his sprinting prowess. It also might be the curse of the rainbow jersey. We can't forget about that. He did such a great job last year, won so many bike races, that his thirst for revenge might have been slaked, wherein last year he won so many bike races after being left off the Saeco team. He has his own team now, so I'm not sure if the motivation is still there. But to break this record by Binda, he'll really have to start firing. He'd have to race a lot better, even though he still has a lot more chances to go. A lot of good young talent, though, contesting all those sprints. It's going to be hard for Cipollini.
Yeah, it's proving not to be quite as easy. I think everybody thought. This is a tough record even now. Well, the man who's still, after winning stage 1 in the pink jersey, is Alessandro Petacchi. So let's catch up now with the overall situation in the race, because Petacchi took out stage 1 and he's been extremely consistent since then. Here he is on the podium, enjoying again another pink jersey. He's won a few of them now, I think 6 over the years as a leader of the Giro d'Italia. But you know, overall, his lead is very scant, as it should be at this stage of the race. 17 seconds over yesterday's winner, Garzelli. 27 over the very consistent Francesco Casagrande. And the Gaspare completing there the top 5. But now into the top 10 for the first time. Gilberto Simoni, still many people's favourite to win. Lungi Eloy crashed yesterday as well, is still holding 8th place. And Bo Hamburger propping them all up in the top 10. A few notables for you. Aitor Gonzalez slips out of the top 10 to 11th after yesterday. Pantani riding well in 17th. And Julio Perez there in 46th. Remember, Julio won the King of the Mountains last year. I think concentrating on a better overall position this year rather than the King of the Mountains. Well, there's no real mountains today, Paul, as we go down towards the very end of the country on the mainland. Maybe it is a ride for Cipollini.
Well, it could be a ride for the sprinters, but you know, the thing is, these small hills are turning out to be great big mountains for Mario Cipollini. But if we take a quick look at the map, it really is a fairly flat opening start to the race today for the first 100 kilometres or so. We again go down to the peninsula at the bottom, and then that's where the climb happens. It climbs up to about 600 metres, and then it's all downhill into a very fast finish.
Thank you, Paul. Well, about 15 minutes ago, a breakaway of 3 riders leading by 2 minutes and 35 seconds were led over the Intergiro there by Elio Aggiano. And those 3 riders getting away today soon after the start. This is now the 4th stage of the race, 170 kilometres, going for a first-time finish in Vivo Valencia. This is the breakaway. It went, believe it or not, after 1 kilometre of riding today, and they covered 44.5 kilometres in the opening hour. So despite a 20-minute late start, they are now well up on schedule. Elio Aggiano from Formaggio Pinzolo, Martin Vastia from Tenex, and Julian Luzano Martinez from Kelme are the 3 breakaways. Well, let's have a look then at the start this morning. We should have 167 riders taking to the start today. And those riders still completing the course, we hope. There we are. 169 there was at the beginning, 167 now with the loss of Rick Verbrugge, and 16 of the 19 teams still ride with all 9 men on them. So a breakaway, boys, as we now look at the... Let's just remind ourselves of that result, and then you'll have the 3 names. There they are, Vestia, Aggiano and Usano Martinez. Martinez a pro for 3 years, by the way, and he's never won a race, but he's certainly putting his back right now into this breakaway. As we switch down the back of the field here, one of the Factor boys dropping back for a word with the boys. Good breakaway, Bob, and a very fast pace.
Very nice little breakaway. When Kelme came to the Giro d'Italia this year, it looked as if their roster was not quite as strong as it has been in years past. Here's the Lamprey riders getting back into the bike race after perhaps a flat tire, because there's a couple of teammates helping one back on. That might be Francesco Casagrande in there. Gone back to the team car perhaps to have a word with their team director. They've already lost Mariano Piccoli. That's a blow to the squad, but they're still hanging tough. Kelme's done really well, considering what we thought on paper the team that they brought to this race was not as strong as it has been in years past. They've lost some riders, most significantly Santiago Botero and Aitor Gonzalez, to other teams who have a little bit more money. But Kelme, always aggressive, always in the breakaways. They love the Grand Tours. That's where they've made their bread and butter, and they're back out on the breakaway again today, although I do have a feeling that that will come back to the fold before the end of this race.
Head of the group, Graham Brown, with his tongue out there, just looking at the camera, saying it's pretty rough going today, and a glimpse there too of Alessandro Petacchi. So, Paul, we've got 3 riders clear of the race, and they've been hovering around the 3-minute mark. 2 minutes 35 at the moment. So I think as we look back here at the field, as I say, they're all enjoying themselves just now, but it's at a very good pace today. The only Swede in the race there, Magnus Bagstedt. Stay with the action. We're underway now. This is the man causing the problems, and we'll take a break. And there's the latest gap coming at us now, 1 minute and 12 seconds. So all of a sudden, the boys are beginning to chase. I may have misled you with the official result there of the Intergiro. It was a win for Aggiano. Second was Usano Martinez, and third was Martin Bastia. They are the 3 men claiming the small bonuses out on the course. At the time, they were leading by 2 minutes 35. They've been in the lead for exactly 100 kilometres. And they've moved on a ways now. We are approximately 60 kilometres from the finish. We're just waiting for our first actual distance. Looking down there, the rider in the leader's points jersey is in fact Garzelli, the man who won yesterday, riding fittingly enough against the man who won on stage 1 and is the leader of the Tour, of course, Alessandro Petacchi. The other men in the leader's jersey, the sky blue jersey is No Duts in the Inter-Giro competition. The green jersey, the only wearer there so far, Freddy Gonzalez. He's won both the climbs which we have had in the first 3 days of racing.
Well, I think now you can see the interest that the sprinters teams are taking in the chase, Phil. These guys, the 3 leaders we're looking at, they escaped after just 1 kilometre of racing. They never exceeded more than 3 minutes and 5 seconds their advantage. So I think the main field allowed them a bit of freedom, but didn't want them to build up a massive lead, because I think that today the sprinters feel that they've got a very good chance of getting over this climb, which comes at 135 kilometres into the race. And it's interesting to note that Mario Cipollini has sent 1 or 2 of his riders to the front, maybe thinking that he's got a chance today of equaling Alfredo Binder's record. And you know, I have to say, Bob, Mario Cipollini is a man who works on emotion, and he can feel that record slipping away from him.
Well, I think we might see something special from Cipollini today as well. Time is running out for the flat stages of the riders, and they'll start to get into the big mountains pretty soon, and I'm sure he'd love to equal that record soon. To his advantage, Alessandro Petacchi's had a lot of work to defend the pink jersey, maybe take a little bit of the speed out of his legs, and Robbie McEwen on a bit of a breakaway in the finale of the bike race yesterday, which we never thought we'd see him do. It didn't work out for him. That might put a little bit of fatigue into his legs as well, and so Cipollini in for his probably best shot at a stage win of the bike race so far today at the end of the race.
Well, the gap's gone up a little bit here, 1 minute 33, and pulling away again. We're 58 kilometres from the finish as we look down on the peloton, speeding towards the Toe of Italy today. A first-time finish, by the way, in Vibo Valentia, and then tomorrow it's over to the island of Sicily for 1 stage of the event, and then a day off for the riders, but it's really a travel day as they go up towards Napoli, where they'll resume the race on Friday.
Well, Landbau Credit now coming to the front, deciding they want to keep the tempo as high as possible. Coda del Gruppo, the rear end of the main field. And I've been scouring the Italian press field to see if there was any animosity between Marco Pantani and Mario Cipollini after that move on the first day. Well, in fact, Mario Cipollini himself declared that there was no problem at all. He said even if Marco Pantani's team hadn't gone to the front and set the tempo, he couldn't have won that stage anyway. So Mario seems pretty chilled out, Bob.
He seems more relaxed than we've seen him in the Giro d'Italia for a very long time, as long as I can remember. It's quite remarkable that he's still contending stage wins and the points jersey in this bike race many, many years after he started winning stages in the 80s. It's an incredible career that he's had, and he just needs this Binder record to make it all complete.
Let's not forget he holds 2 other records. In fact, he's the winner of the fastest stage of the Giro d'Italia and also the fastest stage of the Tour de France. So he seems to chase records wherever he goes. But I think the culmination for him, Phil, last year was getting the World Championships jersey. That was something maybe a couple of years ago he didn't dream about. There's a little bit of the danger of wearing the pink jersey. These guys are so close together, and just a moment's inattention, you can find yourself quite quickly on the ground.
Well, they seem to have this race under control. 55 kilometres to go now. 1 minute and 12 seconds was the official time gap. Well, we've just seen 1 minute 33. Beautiful countryside down. And welcome back. Still our lone Polish rider in the lead here, Wojciech Chmielewski, as we continue on the 4th stage of the Giro d'Italia. And the riders now heading on the climb. It's a fairly long climb, this, and it's easy-ish gradient, Paul, just over 10 kilometres in fact. We've noted, though, that Freddy Gonzalez is paying attention.
Very much paying attention. He's unbeaten so far in the King of the Mountains competition. He's got all of his teammates around him at the front. I think they're setting up the pace just a little bit too far out from the finish line, though, because there's at least another 8 kilometres of climbing to go. And their idea is to try and get as many points as possible. It's a strange competition, the King of the Mountains in the Giro d'Italia, because there aren't really that many climbs. And I think sometimes, Bob, the points are really rather strange.
The point's quite strange in the Tour of Italy's mountain competition, and the third
in this part of the world. And Alaio Aggiano, who's in that breakaway, knows these roads better than most. He lives in this region. What a nice place it is to live as well. lovely warm days to go out training on, and he certainly made the most of these opening 3 days, Bob. He's really shown us in front of the cameras, hasn't he?
He's been on the attack every single day. Get out in front of the public there, his own people down here in the south of Italy. It's great to see a local guy doing good.
So as we look down at the 3 leaders, the gap is coming down all of the time. I don't reckon they'll make it to the finish, but you never know. There's Casagrande back after his puncture. We'll take a break. Ruben Marin of the Sella Italia team, and he's receiving a little bit of chastisement there. But why are you laughing?
Well, Secchiati not too pleased with Marin going off the front there when he's right in the middle of the chase. But they're here to stay. It's all back. They're here to race. It's all back together again. And another Sella Italia Columbia rider has gone off the front, and it's in the middle of a chase by the Domino Vacanze team of Mario Cipollini, and not a very popular move.
Luca De Angeli also launching attack, so quite clearly the Columbia Sella Italia team, this is the top team out of Colombia, has launched yet another attack here, being joined by Gerolsteiner's Stefan Weingold. So these 2 riders, I always find it funny, Paul, when riders on rival teams come and tell people off for attacking. Isn't that what they get paid to do?
Well, it's rather strange, you know, the guys on the front were organising the chase. Now, they don't mind if it's a serious attack that's going to ride away, but all it does really is annoys a team who are trying to get the pace-making organised on the front end of the main field. And that's what the French really call like a wet firework, that attack, isn't it, Bob? Because it sort of takes the guy 20 or 30 metres off the front. There's Mario Cipollini, looking a lot better today in the World Champions jersey. And I have a feeling Mario Cipollini has got all of the men motivated today. They had a superb train setting up the possible sprint yesterday for Gabriele Colombo, who they thought had a great chance of taking the pink jersey. And I think we might well find today that Alessandro Patacchi might have heavy legs, because he's done an awful lot of work to defend the pink jersey. We're starting now the early few kilometres of this climb. Climbs up to 600 metres or 1,800 feet in altitude. It's a long, steady climb of about 10 kilometres.
A little way to go yet. We're riding now in the province of Vibo Valentia. We came in a few kilometres back, and we're starting to climb up this little shelf here with a few twists and turns. It'll take the riders up to a total of just under 2,000 feet. And it looks like a De Angeli here doing what Marin started. He was the counter-attack, and he's opened up a gap. Well, very shortly we must be seeing those 3 riders. They can't hold off, I don't think, this breakaway. There's some little information for you. Myself, Paul Sherwen and Bob Roll, we're all online tomorrow, May the 14th, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, just before the prime time show. So come on board in the chat room and ask us some questions. olntv.com is the website address. There's the 2 escapers. I don't think we've caught the 3 leaders, have we?
Yeah, we have. We actually caught them just a few moments ago, just before we started the climb.
Like that, Paul.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that we did catch them. There was a bit of confusion because there were 1 or 2 moves going off the front end of the main field, and as somebody was attacking, those guys were actually getting caught at the same time. It all basically came back together before they started the climb, but now, as we're on the early slopes of the climb, these guys are starting to take this a little bit more seriously. This is Ignacio Gutierrez from Kelme trying to launch the move, and I think, as Bob said, this is not the most experienced Kelme squad, but already they've made themselves pretty well noticed.
They've been attacking every time the road has gone up, which hasn't been a lot in the Giro d'Italia so far this season. But as the race progresses, we have some huge mountain stages to come when the GC battle will really take form. And Kelme, a part of all the attack so far, trying to get some publicity, and perhaps they'll get a stage win. Icor Gonzalez did just that last year early in this bike race, exploding out of the field on one of these long uphill finishes. Not a real mountain pass, but a very tough climb to the finish last year, and he was able to win a stage, and I think that gave him a lot of confidence and momentum for the season, and he went on to win the Volta a España. Now he signed a contract with the Fossa Bortolo team, and he's one of our hot favorites in this Giro d'Italia. Even though he lost some time yesterday, he wasn't very pleased with that. He lost 9 seconds to a flying Stefano Garzelli in yesterday's stage.
Well, 2 men who lost a lot of time really was Frigo and Gonzalez, Bob, who I think were a little bit surprised at doing that, because it wasn't really the sort of climb you'd expect them to lose time. And at the end of the day, all these small seconds that they're losing, it could add up to at least half a minute before we get to the mountains.
Well, the riders here, and there's a couple of Kelme riders on the front. Kelme, don't forget, started with only 8 man. Their choice. They didn't have 105 in the race this year. But it is a team that's been stripped of some of its star names over the winter, and they are still first race, and let's hope they continue to do so. They're a very strong lineup. Galvez is their sprinter and their team leader. So there's a little group there of some 8 or 9 riders, getting bigger by the minute. 4 more trying to get across the gap. But the pace is really on here now. We've seen 1 or 2 riders already losing ground at the back of the field here. As the riders continue to launch an attack, and this is a rider from the CCC Polsat team who's having a go. Skimilievski, Piotr Skimilievski, good friend of ours, Paul, because he once won the Commonwealth Bank Cycling Classic in Australia, and he speaks a little bit of English as well. He used to be on the Polish Moroz team. Anyway, he's having a dig now, and they all want to race towards the finish. Lovely conditions as the Giro d'Italia heads towards the finish. About 45 kilometres to go.
Second and first category climbs been given a lot of points compared to the beyond category, the Hor category climb, so it takes a while to figure it out. Generally speaking, though, the best climber does win that competition year after year, although on one occasion I recall that the award was given to Francesco Casagrande, and I think that was a bit of a disaster because he had equal points, and in the rule books it said that the winner of the last climb, even if the points were equal, would get the jersey. They took it away, however, from the Colombian rider Chepe Gonzalez anyways, and gave it to Francesco Casagrande, and I thought that that was a bit of a travesty and a miscarriage of justice. But Casagrande losing the pink jersey on the penultimate day was giving a consolation prize there. Big attacks now coming from the Spanish riders on the Kelme team and the Colombian rider here, Freddy Gonzalez, covering those and trying to get some more points for the King of the Mountain. Notably at the front of the peloton was both Pataki and Cipollini. Not a very difficult gradient so far on this climb, and those 2 riders, the sprinters of our race, are still right in the front of the bike race. And here you see Cipollini right there in the front, riding quite comfortably, it seems like, so far on this climb.
He's using a nice small gear there, just ticking it over. There's Marco Pantani as well, 141, Il Pirata, and he really seems to be riding himself into some kind of form in this year's Giro d'Italia, and it will be interesting to see how he does perform when we come up to the big mountains, and everybody gets their first test really on that big mountaintop finish just outside of Rome, the Terminillo, and that, I think, as Bob has said on a number of occasions, will be the first chance, Phil, we have to see who really is in good form and who could be a possible winner of the Giro at the end of this 3 weeks.
Carlos Garcia there, doesn't look like a great climber, does he? Sitting on the front there with Gonzalez and Chmielewski. Chmielewski, remember, was the man who started it. They've got more riders coming up towards them, and we expected a very fast climb. It's good road, steady gradient, a chance to turn the big gears. 2 more riders have latched on the back there. It was a sky blue jersey. I don't think it was the Intergiro leader. It might be Nodats who's got on there. And it can't be that hard because Cipollini's still in the group.
Well, Cipollini's riding himself into form as well. I think a lot of pressure on him over the first couple of stages, Phil, because he knew he had to try and equal this record. Looked a little bit like Charlie Wegelius jumping across the gap there, British rider riding for the Formaggi Pinzoli team. And he's pretty high up in the overall classification, just outside the top 30. But for him, this is his first crack, really, at riding a 3-week stage race.
Well, good to see Charlie in the action, one of only 3 British riders in the action.
One of the Landbau Credit riders there, and another Saeco rider. It looked like they were in the cars there. They might be having a little bit of trouble on this climb, the Cresta di Zungri. It's 16 Ks from the finish. It's 608 meters in elevation, almost 2,000 feet. Average gradient is only 4% because it is such a long climb, but that's a pretty stiff one, and it is quite close to the finish line. The sprinters know they have to stay right near the front of the group if they'll have a chance to catch up on the Panaria rider now coming across to the front of the breakaway also. Lots of attacks now. This race is heating up, and that's Charlie Wegelius of the Dinardi Colpack team covering the moves from the Kelme team at this moment in the front. See where the chase comes from in the peloton right now, but you know that Freddy Gonzalez is in there for one reason, and that is to win some King of the Mountain points, which he has a real stranglehold on that competition so far in the Giro d'Italia.
Well, this is a 3rd category climb. This is the situation after only 2 climbs in the race so far. Gonzalez has won them both, a 3rd and the 2nd category climb. This one counts as a 3rd. And Grishenko lies in 2nd, but he's 5 points behind. Casagrande very consistent through all of his riding so far. And Garzelli is there too. Tirolongo, as you can see, he's just joined the breakaway, and with good reason, because he lies 5th in the competition. He couldn't get the lead today, but he could close the gap on the race leader Gonzalez. Just to give you the full composition of the breakaway: Chmielewski of the CC Polstat, Gonzalez, Freddy Gonzalez, Carlos Garcia, Charlie Wegelius and Paolo Tirolongo. But the gap, not really too much to talk about just now. But you see, although it appears to be good tempo riding in the peloton, The big men are having all sorts of trouble conquering even these little slopes here. Wait till they get to the Dolomites. This is Riebenbauer from Austria. You'd think he'd go better on the hills from Austria, wouldn't you?
We get a chance to see just what happens to a bike rider when he pops, and that man certainly did pop, didn't he, Bob? He's going off the back of the main field right now, and there's still quite a fair distance to go from the summit of this climb to the finish, and he may well be skirting the doors of elimination if he doesn't pick up the tempo. There's Julian Wynne, the British national champion, had a good day yesterday, suffering a little bit today. It always takes 1 or 2 days, doesn't it, to get into the rhythm of a bike race like this, Bob, and sometimes on the 3rd or 4th day you go through a bad patch and then you seem to just ride yourself in.
Everyone's level of fatigue comes up to the highest point after the first 3 or 4 or 5 days. The race calms down a lot. It's a much more regular tempo. I'm surprised to see so much damage being thrown into the peloton now. Riders cracking and dropping off the back in droves now. It must be quite a fast tempo in the front of the bike race.
Well, this is Julian Wynne here. He's just about holding this back wheel. He knows he's got about 4 or 5 kilometres, I estimate, Paul, still to climb. That could be about 7 or 8 minutes.
Well, it's a very long climb. I would say we've got at least another 5 minutes before we get to the summit of this climb. But you can see, as Bob has said, there's a certain amount of damage being done on the front because of the high tempo. Mario Cipollini slipping down the line here. He's got a couple of teammates around him. I think he was hoping to survive on the slopes of this climb here today, but this is not the great Mario Cipollini of last year. I think he's having an awful hard time. Not happy with the press coverage right now, is he, Bob? Because when you're suffering, you really want to do it in silence.
Yes, you'd like to suffer in anonymity. Excuse me. Yes, thank you, Paul. He has his helmet straps undone also. He might be incurring a fine right now.
That's certainly against the rules.
That's most definitely against the rules, although it does seem to be clipped on the back of his neck, so maybe he'll just get away with not getting a fine there. He does have the proper jersey on.
That'll ensure the helmet goes one way in his head, the other when he falls off, won't it?
That's true, too. He's fighting to stay into the group, though. He has his teammates with him. He's running out of chances to win stages. This one is not a bad chance for him to win stages, but the climbing has been very, very hard so far. I think because the hot temperatures also that the Giro's been subjected to so far. Temperatures in the high 30s centigrade, so in the low 80s to even the low 90s in the Giro d'Italia. That's very hard to climb when it's so hot out, and the riders still adjusting to the new helmet law when they have the helmets on their head. I don't think that physiologically speaking is a big, huge difference. We've lost our pictures for a moment, excuse these breakups, but they're coming from the helicopters from Italy, and it's a long ways back to the United States. Here is the whole peloton coming through. Cipollini's got to reintegrate this group. He's just barely hanging on to the end of it, trying to get over this climb. If he can do so, he knows he's in for a good chance for a stage win. All his teammates around them trying to help them, doing whatever they can to keep him in the bike race in the front there, have a chance at the sprint.
It's Carlos Garcia, Cuesta, Quesada, still on his own. I think he is on his own now. We'll just try and get a swing round of the camera here. But it looks to me as though the field, keeping this tempo up, is doing a lot of damage in that main pack. Now, once they're over the top of this climb, they still have 34 kilometres to go to the finish, so there is a chance for a little bit of a regroupment. Cipollini's been in the situation on the last couple of days and he hasn't got back on, but this is possibly the best chance he'll have if he can limit his losses. Here's the breakaway, and here comes more riders to the fore now as they start to bridge the gap. It looks like we've got Sandy Cesar again crossing the gap.
Well, this is a hard way to get into a breakaway right now because the hammer has been on since we started the early kilometres of this climb. It was Sandy Cesar coming across there. He's a very good bike rider. A lot of people see him as a future French star. Mario Cipollini is a star in his own makings, but at the moment he's having a very difficult time here in the Giro d'Italia. There is the leader of the points competition and the man who at the moment, Phil, has climbed himself up into second place in the overall classification, Stefano Garzelli. I think a lot more relaxed now after getting himself that nice little victory yesterday. The points competition, by the way, is still being led by Alessandro Patacchi, who is the pink jersey leader as well, ahead of Garzelli with 34 points. Gabriele Colombo has moved himself up into third place, and Cipollini, who we've seen win this competition numerous times, 4 in total, in fact, is in fourth place with 28 points.
Looks like Giovanni Lombardi here, the big man. Normally he's in the services of lead out for Mario Cipollini, but he's got himself into this little group here. A surprisingly good all-round bike rider. He climbs the mountain alongside Freddy Gonzalez in green. But here we have Carlos Garcia pushing the pressure on. He's got rid of that breakaway, put them back in that chase group, and he's still trying to do something.
Well, everyone's still trying to get off the front end of the main field here, and this is not really what you would rank as a major climb, but it has done, once again, Bob, a certain amount of damage in the main field, because a lot of riders are gasping for breath at the back end of the main field. If for Freddie Gonzalez, if he gets the points at the top of this climb, it's certainly been a very well-earned set of points, because he attacked after about 2 kilometres of climbing.
Well, there's the full lineup of the chase group as they come up behind Garcia. Very briefly as it was, as we look down here now on Tomasz Brezina in the orange jersey there, the Polish rider, the CCC Polestar. Very good climber, very good all-round bike rider actually. At the sharp end of the race here, the peloton seems to have steadied out a little bit now. Got rid of a few of the weaker ones, but it's a little bit of sensible climbing being done by the boys now.
Alessandro Patacchi just coming into the picture there. He's done a great job to keep the pink jersey so far. And one thing, the Domina Vacanze team did a big raid yesterday to try to get Colombo into the jersey. He was laying in the top 3 overall at the start of the stage. He knew if he got some time bonuses and that Patacchi perhaps would get dropped and that he would get the pink jersey. Patacchi saw what they were doing, made an extra special effort to get himself into 3rd place on the stage and was able to keep his jersey. I think he was a little bit upset that they would try to steal the jersey off of his back, the Domina Vacanze team, so he did everything he could to keep Colombo out of it, and he did retain it for another day. Now he said he thinks he can keep it for 4 more days before the first big climb to Terminilio in a couple of days' time, after they go to Sicily and then back to the mainland. He's had a great Giro so far, and just as the doctor ordered from Michele Ferretti, his team director, he's done a great job to keep the pink jersey for so long. All kinds of publicity for the Fossa Bortolo team. The #1 team at the end of the season last year, they've fallen down through the rankings. It's another Italian team that since the start of the season has become the #1 team in the world, and that would be none other than the Saeco team. And they're having a great season so far, especially Astarloa has won a couple of classics himself, and in the early season, he's doing great. So Saeco, the #1 team in the world now. Kelme, the #1 team in the Giro, by my money, as far as attacking going, always up in the front. They're doing a great Giro so far. All the Spanish riders from the Spanish team, Kelme.
And sorry about our, we're losing our little pictures there, coming in from Italy. We couldn't be much further south of the country, but we're holding them again now. Sandy Cazar there, the Française des Jeux rider, the French team in the race, trying to get their man, their strong man, up to Carlos Garcia. Here he is, and getting ever more urgent in those pedal revs here as he senses the summit of the mountain. He's not that far ahead of what is becoming a very workmanlike group, as Cazar still wants to hunt him down. He's just around the corner, and Sandy Cazar, he's a rider who's tipped for greatness, Paul, and each year he seems to get that little bit stronger. Had a great result in Paris-Nice last year.
Yeah, he finished 2nd overall in Paris-Nice last year. A difficult start to the season for him, but I think he's one of those riders who maybe has changed his preparation this year, looking to try and ride better in the 3-week-long Tour de France. The reason that the Française des Jeux team have been brought here is because it's a young team, riders who need to learn how to handle the rigours of a 3-week stage race like this. And I think a lot of people will be very surprised, Phil, by the fact that this small 3rd category climb, which really hasn't climbed up all that much in altitude, 600 metres, which is about 1,900 feet of climbing, really has done a lot more damage than most people would have expected. There's a fairly significant group now starting to form at the front end of the main field, but still I think the big leaders quite content, Bob, to just watch each other for the moment.
A lot of marking going on in the peloton behind. A little bit of a regroupment now as Quesada is up the road for the Kelme team, starting to look at each other a little bit. I think the riders are a bit surprised at how difficult this climb is, and a lot of riders getting shelled off the back. We saw a few of them pedaling absolute squares as they were being dropped on the early slopes of the climb. It's a very painful part of a bike race to be in. I've been there a lot of times. You try to match the accelerations of the climbers, but what you end up doing in the long run is just trying to limit your losses. And here we see up the road into the town where I believe was the King of the Mountain there, was across the line. So that might be a different preem, and they might still be climbing for a while.
Yeah, I think this is actually, we're in the town here of Zungri, but the climb, if it is the town of Zungri, still goes on for 4 more kilometres as we continue through the town and up to the crest itself of the climb. Nice little crowd there. There was definitely a line on the road there, Bob, and I'm wondering if they offered a special preem from the town folk here in the town of Zungri. This is the peloton, looking a little bit ragged at the tail end now, isn't it, as the hill begins to bite into the legs of some of the riders who are seen more as the sprinters. This is Riera, who was on the attack yesterday. I'm sorry we're having a little bit of problem with our pictures. We'll do our best to hang on to them. Remember, these are live pictures coming in from the Tour of Italy. We'll be back for the crest of the climb.